Now, they say that love is in the air, and frankly, it is Valentine's Day, so by rights, love should be in the air. But I don't know. We've yet to see whether or not that will be the case throughout this show here on Men's radio station. Now, just in case you're panicking, thinking, my ears, they deceive me. What's happened? Don't you worry. It is not Russ Kane. I'm afraid he sends his sincerest apologies. Mr. Kane is laid up with a rather mysterious bug, but don't worry. We don't believe it to be corona. But naturally, we do wish Russ a very speedy recovery, because I'm quite convinced he will be listening to this. And if not listening to it live, he may well listen back just to determine whether or not I am destined to be fired or not. But all the same, your company is very much appreciated. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for tuning into Men's radio station with me, Phil Dave. On the decks, we do have the boy wonder producer who, for the last time, I can say, 24 years old, because it's his birthday on Sunday. But don't worry, we are going to sort that. And Goddess of the Green Room is also here as well. We'll introduce her in just a moment. She's holding up the cake to anyone who's interested in watching on Facebook. So
Oreo.
Hello to you on Facebook. But James Blake is rocking the decks. There you go. And Goddess of the Green Room, yes, Deborah Blake is also here as well. And somewhere around, we hope that we're going to be joined by Mr. Social Media Dennis as well. He should be along shortly, but I'm afraid that where they say radio waits for no man, I'm afraid Dennis waits for no radio. So he will be here hopefully imminently, but we'll wait to see. All the same, though, your company I do very much appreciate. And I can hear you crying out, stop waffling, what is on the show today? Well, I'm very pleased you asked me that, because coming up on the show today, we've got an absolute feast for you, a real treat. We're going to be meeting Dr. Peter Marshall. Now, Dr. Peter Marshall is a psychologist, he's a polymath, an author, regional chairman of Mensa, and more. I mean, there are no business cards big enough to fit those titles on. So I very much look forward to meeting Dr. Peter later on and finding out. Yes, you do know that when you whisper in front of a microphone, it can be heard, Goddess of the Green Room.
Sorry.
Yes, there we go. Right, anyway, but we look forward to meeting Dr. Peter Marshall a little later on. I'm going to look at Facebook, actually, because I've realised I'm not really facing you guys, so I'm very sorry. It's a bit ironic, really. It's called Facebook, and I'm facing the wrong way. But anyway, we're also going to meet Graham Godfrey. Now, Graham Godfrey here, I love this title. It just says, sack the researcher. You see, you're fired already. It just says, passionate about business. Why is he passionate about business, James? What does he do? Great, I'm pleased you asked. Graham Godfrey is a coach, and also we will be finding out exactly what he coaches later on. And then by absolutely no means least, but finally we're also going to speak to Dr. Tony Ortega.
Tony Ortega.
There you go. You see, this is why it's really important to read your notes before going live with them, you see. But Dr. Tony Ortega is a clinical psychologist and author of Are You Here Yet? I love that title. I'm very much looking forward to finding about Are You Here Yet? So that's what's coming up. But what do we want you to do? Goddess of the Green Room, are you quite well?
I'm looking for a tissue. I'm so sorry. I don't have it, honestly. I've only just got a slight sniffle.
For heaven's sake. So there we go.
It appears the flu has made her way to...
I don't know. Whatever Russ Kane has
London dust
has gone a little further than I anticipated.
I'll
have the rest of those back, thank you very much.
I sneezed
anyway,
over...
Unbelievable.
I sneezed over there.
Such schnorrer behaviour in your life.
In my arm.
No, that's very good. And actually, do you know what? In this age where we are quite concerned, in all seriousness, of viruses spreading, which don't even get me started on coronavirus, because what a load of hyped up nonsense. But let's not start on that. But in the age where we are seriously worrying about the way that viruses are spreading, it is super important that when you sneeze, how many times do not sneeze in your hand? Don't sneeze into the air, sneeze into the crease of your elbow.
Why not sneeze into your hand?
Because if you sneeze into your hand, the germs go on your hand and you can still spread the germs.
But then, I mean, if you sneeze into the elbow, it's not really the...
no, if you do it properly, right, we're going to demonstrate this on Facebook. Facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, by the way. But if you do decide to sneeze into your arm, what actually happens, I'm going to have to move slightly away from the microphone to demonstrate this, is you do actually cover up the mouth and the nose properly if you do that.
And the shoulder with your coat, and the shoulder under your arm with your coat.
But however riveting this is, and believe me, on radio, I'm sure this is perfectly riveting, I would like to encourage you, yes, you listening right now, to get involved, because as you could not possibly have escaped to notice that today is obviously the February the 14th, it is Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's, and I suppose that what we want to ask you is whether or not you believe that love is good for your mental health and well-being. That's the angle I want to take on Men's Radio today, because I think it's very easy for anyone who's on air today to ask you, are you in love? What are you doing for Valentine's Day? But I'm not really interested in that. And I don't mean that in a rude way. I mean it in the sense that it's none of my business. But what I would love to know is whether or not you believe that if you find yourself in love or loved by someone, whether or not that actually does wonders for your mental health and well-being. Because let's be honest, if you find yourself having a bit of a down day, there's nothing like a hug as a pick-me-up. I think that a hug is one of the most powerful ways to remedy feeling low and feeling down. And I wonder whether or not you agree with that. And if you do find that your health and well-being is affected by the way those around you love, or perhaps even, dare I suggest, don't love you, then I really want to hear from you. So please do give us a call. Telephone number is 0203 290 4411. 0203 290 4411. What does love mean to you, and how does it affect your health and well-being? Don't forget, there's obviously many other ways that you can get in contact with the show as well. Please get in contact with us through social media, facebook.com/Men's Radio STN. And you can also find us on Twitter and on Instagram at Men's Radio STN. Let's turn to our esteemed colleagues in the studio here, because I happen to know that Goddess of the Green Room, this is something that I know that you're quite into, if I suppose that's the right way of putting it, isn't it? You are quite into the notion of love and how important it is to love one another.
I think just before we should preface that you are a, MCBA accredited counsellor?
BACP, yes.
BACP accredited counsellor. You're not just the Goddess of the Green Room.
No, there is actually some method to the madness here.
You have to learn to love yourself first. And this is the way I live my life. I lead my life. But it's taken me a long time, because depression, if you don't love yourself first, you can't remain stable in that love of a relationship. Because when that person goes down and doesn't give you that feed and rush, if you don't love yourself, you're not stable enough to cope with it. In my line of work, I'll see it many times, this rush of love, and then the depression will come back.
Now, you see, the problem is, of course, arguably there is a very fine line between learning to love yourself and possibly coming across as a bit full of your own lack of importance.
No.
So where is that boundary?
Well,
because I don't know whether or not it's very clear where that lies.
But for me, I think it's things like positive affirmations is loving yourself. Right?
Oh, check you out. You've been reading a dictionary this week. Positive affirmations. Look at you.
So saying things like, I am good, I am great, I'm going to have a good day today, I feel good, Your
ego.
Feeding the ego.
No. The ego is the part of you that an insecure ego will make you behave that way. Behave in the way that you... But when you truly love yourself, and I know I play about in here and go, fabulous, darling, and all that stuff, but I do love myself.
Well, of course, egotism does stem an awful lot of the time from someone's insecurity.
Yes.
The fact that someone probably inwardly thinks either they dislike themselves intently, or they are worried about what other people might think of them.
Because they don't know themselves internally. It's a journey that you have to embark on, and it requires courage. But if you don't know what you want, how can you find the connection with someone else? If you don't know who you are.
Do you really think people used to overthink it back in the day? Let's just say we go back in time when most marriages were, well, as you say in Yiddish, a shidduch. So in other words, arranged. In other words, you were put together. Do you really believe that people thought truly about love? And do you not believe now, well, I certainly believe now, that because people are allowed to overthink and almost overthink too much about the way love is and what love means to them, that's why I believe relationships don't last in quite the same way anymore, is because suddenly we find ourselves in the fortunate position to be able to say to ourselves, this is not what I want from life. And yet, without realising the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. And I think there's where a massive problem lies.
It was very different. Look, okay, so Because of
I'm
the
delighted to report, by the way, Mr. Social Media has now arrived. He does now realise that it is 10 past 11. We did actually start the show 10 minutes ago, Dennis. But luckily, he is here, and I will drag him into the studio during the ad break that's coming up in just a moment.
Well, now it's the sense of being indulgent and denying yourself nothing. Not waiting for your betrothed, your beloved. It's now it's instant everything. All there's no pheromonal, there's no chemistry. It's all on this tapping, which has destroyed a lot.
There's no romance, right?
In those days that you're talking about, people had to stay together because they didn't have enough money to separate. They didn't have enough money so they worked through their problems.
But do you think they loved each other?
Maybe it developed into love or respect.
Interesting. So potentially organic love in the sense that it was allowed to develop.
Yes, because these days nothing.
See, the other problem as well, of course.
It's a throwaway age, isn't it?
Yeah, but the other problem as well, of course, is that if people are not allowed to grow together and they are prepared to throw a relationship away so quickly, then it might not actually give them the time to learn to accept and learn to love all the foibles and the quirks that their other half has.
Yes.
And I wonder whether or not that plays a massive part of it as well.
Yes.
Anyway, do you know what? It's very easy for me to sit here and speculate. It's very easy for any of us to sit here and speculate.
I'm not speculating.
We're going to find out what James, the producer, thinks of this in just a moment as well. But I'd much rather know what you think of it. Give us a call on 0203 290 4411. On social media, it's at Men's Radio STN on Twitter and Instagram. And on Facebook, facebook.com/Men's Radio STN.
You're listening to Russ Kane on
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk? Download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental wealth and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. Every seat is a premium seat. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
You're listening to Men Radio Station, where men really talk.
And you are listening to Men's Radio Station with Phil Dave, not Russ Kane, as that misleading bit of audio earlier on would have suggested. In case you have just tuned in and you are wondering, I'm afraid to inform you that poor Russ is off sick today. Now, if you ask me, that's a very poor excuse to get out of Valentine's Day. But all the same, Russ, I do wish you a very speedy recovery, as we all do. You're very much missed today, I'm quite sure. But you are stuck with Phil Dave, James Blake, Deborah Blake, and Dennis Relojo-Howell has joined us as well. So we're all here. It's very exciting. And as the result of it, we've been talking about, because obviously as you have gathered, it is Valentine's Day today, as you might have picked up on already, if not from this show alone, that we are asking whether or not you believe that love is good for your mental health and well-being. Because I think it's very easy for anyone to start talking about what are you up to on Valentine's Day, and do you believe in it, and is it a waste of money? All of the cliche questions that most radio stations put to you. That's not what you're going to find here at Men's Radio, I'm delighted to report. So if you have thought to yourself ever that the love of another human, or a love actually, let's go one step further, and not talking anything dodgy, thank you very much indeed, but the love of a human, or indeed the love of a pet, is actually something that helps to cheer you up. And cheer you up sounds like a very wishy-washy way of actually saying has a positive impact on your mental health and well-being. I really, really do want to hear from you today. So please do give us a call on 0203 290 4411. It would be terrific to hear from you. Now, before the break, we never actually got the chance to hear, James, what you thought of that notion, because I'll say what I think in a moment. I'm here mainly punting for people to tell me, but I've got my theories, but I'll share them in just a moment. What do you think when it comes to affairs of the heart regarding one's health and well-being, in particular their mental health and well-being?
I think it can be a double-edged sword, because you can love someone very, very much, but they can also hurt you greatly, which would affect your mental health. However, I think this term love doesn't necessarily mean, I think what you were alluding to there, it can be a dog, it can be a friend, it can be a relationship. And
sometimes that can be the same person.
Sometimes that can all be in the same thing, yeah, exactly. However, I believe that it's good, because I think isolating oneself is not healthy. I think we need love in our life. We need support structures. We need people to boost our confidence, to tell us, to give us positive affirmations.
So you see, this fascinates me, the way that we say we all need love and loneliness isn't so necessarily good for you. Because I actually, and I've said this many times before, although I'm a very sociable person, I do genuinely love my own company. And I worry about that.
I'm the same.
Because I worry about whether or not that's me just sort of sectioning myself off and segregating away from mainstream. But Lady B, you look as if you're about to come up with some very reassuring words.
When you can be alone and you can be happy, that is part of your self-love. When you can't be alone with your thoughts, it's because you haven't developed enough your soul as a person. You haven't taken the journey inwards. Well, I don't know if you've done it. I think it's just perhaps...
Have I ever journeyed inwards? Well, I had an endoscopy once. Does that count?
No, no, darling, no. It's very important to...
You're lucky I said endoscopy, let's be honest.
It's very important to be able to be alone and to be able to relax, because that's when your inner voice will speak to you. And it will guide you and help you.
Hang on a second. Isn't the problem with inner voices and stuff like that? It's something that one has to believe in. Because I don't believe that everyone has an inner voice.
Well, we do. It's a sixth sense. We all have it. It's just
but do we, though?
Yes, you've got it.
Doesn't one have to believe in that stuff? I'm not saying I don't believe in it, but doesn't one have to believe
whether you believe it or not, it depends how
before you can actually recognise you have got that ability?
It will depend on how enlightened one is. So, some people are born... knowing they have it, it's the first time their first thought. We all have it.
Intriguing. Dennis, you're sitting there rather quietly, which doesn't suit, if you don't mind me saying. How do you feel when it comes to... Oh, okay, actually, I think we should declare this now. The Dennis is the only one in this studio who's actually married, okay? So I think that you can come from this from a very different perspective. Mm-hmm. Do you think that being in a marriage is something that has had a positive impact on your mental health and well-being, or is it something you actually just don't think anything of? Because I believe there are some who just don't think. I don't think they actually have processes of thoughts like this. They probably just think, "Well, I'm married, so what?"
I wouldn't say that marriage really has a big component in relation to my mental health, but I would say that. You were talking earlier about loneliness and isolation and, love. And I think that a great deal of people who actually tend to isolate themselves, they do have mental health issues, so they do have challenges with their mental health. So I would say that it really helps that if you can actually connect with someone, and in my case, I connect with my husband, I do connect with Graham. And so he is actually my support system, and
well, that's what I was going to actually ask about. That is because from a point of view of your well-being and obviously emotional support when one needs it, it's very easy, I think, to turn to those who are closest to you in a time of needing emotional support. Not very often would someone turn to professionals. So, for example, if someone is feeling quite down in the dumps, and again, I hate that wishy-washy way of putting it, but it's just the way I can explain it. If someone is feeling very down and depressed, then they wouldn't necessarily think to turn to professionals such as those that they say the Samaritans. They would actually try and latch on to those who are near. And I actually worry about those who don't necessarily have anyone that near to them that they can latch on to, that they still don't think turning to someone who's a professional can actually help them. So you think actually would it be fair to say that when you do have a, quote, down day, that Graham's the first person you turn to?
Yeah, I would say so. Or anyone within the immediate family. But
and are you very open and honest with them?
Yeah, I am. Of course, I have to be open with my husband, and I'm the kind of person who I don't have any. I'm very fortunate that I'm in a position that I don't have any mental health issues. But if I have any mental health issues, I don't think I would seek any professional help. I'm happy keeping it to myself. I'm happy talking it with my husband. I know it's not healthy, and I don't advocate for that, but it works for me.
See, this is the problem, because I do worry about whether or not this is something that we still haven't quite broken through yet, because I personally absolutely agree. If ever I go through a time when I'm a bit down or a bit unhappy, and of course there are moments when that happens, for me they happen behind closed doors, and I'm very strict about that. Is I don't find myself the kind of individual who can be that transparent. I'm transparent to many, many degrees, but I don't think I could be that transparent that I would find myself being able to turn to somebody and say, well, actually, I'm having a really bad day. I'm just not feeling it today. I'd normally come up with a very predictable excuse and say I'm quite tired. That's normally the best thing I come up with, because then it's plausible, because you display the same sort of symptoms that one would if you're tired. You don't necessarily feel like talking too much, which unfortunately for a lot doesn't happen to me very often, but you don't necessarily feel like talking very much. You also look a bit down in the mouth, and also maybe a bit the colour drained from the face, that sort of behaviour, which of course is all synonymous with a lack of sleep. So I think that for me, I've almost trained myself to not even contemplate talking to others if I feel down, because I have been, and may I stress this, happily single for a very, very long time, that I just don't even think along the lines of, okay, who can I offload to?
But I do. You probably
proposed to you this morning.
It is actually true. I mean, this may come as a bit of a shock, not least of all to James.
Hello.
Goddess of the Green Room this morning. I think what she was actually getting at is that we're both single. What about it? That was more what it boiled down to. But
I was saying, if the worst comes to the worst, I'll marry you, Phil.
Well, that makes me feel wonderful, doesn't it? Isn't that the way to make someone feel really special? If the worst comes to the worst,
darling,
I meant
it in a loving way.
Yes, it sounds like it. Anyway, James, what were you saying?
Don't mind.
Can James imagine him being
a prenup agreement?
May I just stress right here, right now, not least of all for James's sanity and possibly a bit of my own, that I am truly fond of the Goddess of the Green Room, but just not in that way. Anyway, hang on, it's not you, it's me. Right? Isn't that the cliche?
I was trying to share the love. Do you understand?
Yes, that's fine.
We could do each other's hair and things, couldn't we?
Oh, for heaven's sakes, right? Okay, we could share the hair and love. Okay,
I
brilliant.
really wasn't ready for this morning.
No, I'm
When I woke
truly
up this
sorry.
morning-
Don't worry, James. We've got a prenuptial agreement.
I really wasn't ready
Right.
for this morning.
Actually, no word of a lie. One thing she did say is that, but I'm protecting your brother and James.
Nice.
Hilarious.
I'm glad to see you have your priorities right, Mum.
She does indeed have her priorities right, if not a little skewed. Anyway, James, you were trying to say.
I bet you do have a support network, though, and I bet you do have people in your life that you do communicate with if you're having a rough time, without a doubt.
Well, within reason, I do. I mean, I would say that possibly the person that I communicate the most with is my mother, but I think that most sons do that. And especially, and I say that sort of quite nonchalantly, really, because actually I have friends who are not in the least bit, male friends who are not in the least bit close to their mothers, which I actually find very hard to comprehend. Because I'm close to both of my parents, make no mistake, and I am incredibly lucky with the parents that I have, who are in every single which way very supportive of everything about my life. And I know full well I could go to them with anything, and I don't think it's everyone who's in a privileged enough position to say that. But at the same time, there are just some things that I wouldn't dream of burdening them with.
But you do have close friends that maybe you would burden those things with?
Not necessarily, no.
Obviously, there's conversations you have with your parents and there's conversations you have with your friends.
No, but I don't think so.
You also have faith.
I do have. It is true, actually.
This is very powerful in your spiritual growth to have faith, because if you have faith, you have to believe that you have a soul and a spirit. So therefore, you have to believe in sixth sense and so on and so forth.
It's kind of handing over some sort of power, isn't it, in a way, to say, like...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. As they say up north, I've got to believe in our soul. Say that as you will.
Yes,
anyway.
I know. Don't worry. I know. I've heard that one.
Anyway, look, the bottom line is that I think that whichever way love manifests itself in one's life, it is curious how it affects us in different ways. Because clearly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lady B, you are suggesting that if you were not in a position to love others or be loved yourself, your life would be much worse for it. For me, I'm saying that although absolutely I do love others and I am capable of being loved, not very well, but I am capable of being loved, that it doesn't really bother me to that degree where I think it would have a major impact on myself.
Because you must love yourself then. You must love yourself.
Well, isn't that obvious? Hello, I talk for a living.
No, darling, not in that way. We've spoken about it before. You're fortunate enough to have the faith and the support network. But so when you go down and you just go, you say it's for a day or so. When people are suffering really with it, it is a depression that will last much longer when they don't love themselves at all.
Well, there you go. Obviously, your opinion matters just as much. So if you did call us on 0203 290 4411, you will get through to us. You're most welcome to speak to us here on Men's Radio Station this morning with me, Phil Dave, with James Blake, Deborah Blake and Dennis relojo-howell. We'll be back after we've paid the rent.
I've been rejected.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
All you need to know about mental
You're
health.
listening to Russ.
Come forth,
Be gone,
evil spirits.
Be gone.
For all you need to know about mental health in the workplace, I can strongly suggest that you do have a listen to Alex Lichtenfeld, because her show is sensational here on Men's Radio Station. But in the meantime, you are listening to Phil Dave in for Russ Kane, who I'm afraid is off sick today. Do apologise, Russ, wishing you a very speedy recovery. And alongside me, producer James Blake, who for the last time is 24. Next week, we'll be aging him by a year. And we also have the goddess of the green room, Deborah Blake, is also in the studio, as well as Mr. Social Media himself, Dennis Relojo-howell. I'm absolutely delighted to report that it's time to move on to our first guest of the day, because Dr. Peter Marshall is a psychologist, is a polymath, an author, a regional chairman of Mensa, and more. This is a man who I'm looking forward to speaking to, because clearly he must have the world's largest business cards. Dr. Peter Marshall, a very good morning to you. Oh dear, all of that build-up. All of that build-up, and I don't even think he can hear us. But don't worry, we're going to try and sort that, but it's absolutely fine. But we're going to be speaking to Dr. Marshall because he is a distinguished psychologist, and he has worked significantly to contribute towards arts, science, and many other fields. And he's also written, are you ready for this? He's written no less than 28 books. Now, there is a man who I find extraordinary and impressive, all in the same breath.
And also the fact that he's working for
do you know what, Dennis? Rather cruelly, your microphone hasn't been turned back on. So you hold that thought for 2 seconds. We'll get Dennis's microphone turned back on so he can chip in. Because there we go. Now we can hear you, Dennis.
Yeah, and
I'm
also
so
the
sorry.
fact that he's working for Mensa, I think there's a lot of discussions about intelligence and about IQs. Discussions about IQ. I think that would be really an interesting discussion with Dr. Marshall.
It will be indeed, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that I'm hoping that we've fixed the gremlins, and Dr. Peter Marshall, hopefully you can hear us now. A very good morning to you.
Good morning. I can't hear you very well.
No, well, you can hear us a bit, apparently, but just not very well. Let's try this. Let's see whether or not this improves it any more. As I say, a very good morning to you, and welcome to Men's Radio.
I can't really hear you. It's very, very faint.
Oh dear. All right. Well, I tell you, do you know what? I think our gremlins are obviously getting the better of us today. So what we're going to try and do, here's what we're going to do, is during the next ad break, we're going to try and sort those gremlins out, because otherwise we're going to be going back and forth with this, and this doesn't sound so good. So Dr. Peter Marshall, we look forward to speaking to you later. But there is proof. We've just heard him, so he does exist. He is out there, and hopefully he'll be with us before very long.
It's just a teaser.
It is. It absolutely. It's, as we say in the industry, it's a tease. It's just to make sure that you have your whistle wetted for when we actually
Speaking
do
of
speak
whistles
to him.
being wetted, would you like me to make some tea?
Look, do you know what? Goddess of the Green Room has actually got her instincts already just sort of so hardwired in that there's no escape.
It's my sixth sense.
Prepared, totally and utterly prepared to abandon the studio
I'll be back.
in order to make refreshments for everyone. So thank you very much indeed. I'm sure that would be most welcome, but don't you worry about it now. Why not deal with it during the next outbreak?
Okay.
But as we have been saying, we are talking about love here on Men's Radio Station today, in particular because of it being Valentine's Day. The angle that we've decided to go with is how love affects one's mental health and well-being. Now, if you don't want to come on air and talk to us, that's fine. It's not ideal. We'd love you to get on air because that's obviously what Men's Radio Station exists for. You're most welcome to call 0203 290 4411. That's 0203 290 4411. But alternatively, if you would rather, you are also welcome to connect with us through social media. And the way in which to do that is you go to facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, as in the shortened version of the word station. Men's Radio STN is also at Men's Radio STN on Twitter and Instagram. Do it. What's the worst that could happen? Our strapline here at Men's Radio Station is where men really talk. Now, this is only going to work if you take note of that and if you actually do that. Because it's so important in this day and age where clearly our lives are so much busier and so much more full on than they used to be back in the day. It's no coincidence that here in the metropolis that we seem to be succumbing to the pressures that our mental health puts on us. And whereas out in the country and out in some of the quieter countries out there in the world, they are the ones who are far happier and much more at ease with themselves. But that's what Men's Radio Station is all about. We are ultimately here to talk, and we want you to talk. So please do. You don't have to give your real name. If you would rather remain anonymous, that's perfectly okay. That doesn't bother me. But I'd love to hear from you whether or not you believe love has a positive or a negative impact on your mental health. Now, for me personally, I've already sort of said a little bit of this, but I'll sort of go into it in a bit more depth. Me personally, I'm not convinced that it does play a massive part. Now, I cannot deny that for me, if I am feeling a little bit down in the dumps, and again, I'm really sorry to use wishy-washy expressions, but I'm hoping you'll roll with me and you'll understand why I use them. But if I'm feeling a bit down, actually there's nothing quite like a good hug. It's just something about it that sort of does. It's almost like, and again, I do not want to sound like I'm hugging trees for a living or anything like that, but it's almost as though there's some sort of energy that does pass on to you. And I mean that in the most non-fantical way ever. I mean it in the sense that actually it's just a reassurance. And I don't think it's a coincidence that if you think back to when we're in our infant stage, when a baby cries, what's one of the easiest ways to stop it to cry? You pick it up, you hold it. And it's almost that protection, isn't it? It's that sense of safety and well-being because someone has put their arms around you as if to say, I've got you now.
Well, isn't it? And it's a feeling of acceptance, right? When someone gives you a hug, it's a feeling of like
Well, not any longer. People are terrified. I still hug people. I still hug people all the time. But I kind of get away with it because it's the way I am. There's no malice intended, but people are terrified to touch one another.
Well, I think it's pretty hard to have a malicious intent in a hug.
People are afraid to touch one another.
But you do, I hate to say it, you hear these horror stories about when someone potentially would do something for someone else as a, quote, good deed, and then they hug them, and then at the same time they pinch their phone out of their pocket. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So I'm not going to start sort of pointing fingers at those who may do that, but you know what I'm talking about. It does happen. Unfortunately, it is scandalous. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that would happen between friends and family, but at the same time, people are very suspicious of each other. And sadly, I believe in this day and age with very good reason.
And you said that our lives are so full, but we're empty because we deny ourselves love. We give ourselves everything else.
But that's quite a blanket statement.
But this is what I'm trying to explain. That if you have self-love, you will become more lovable. And the way you approach people is a different wavelength that you go on. You become enlightened. And the way you approach people, they know that you are not
But you see,
malicious.
okay, so I tell you what my problem is with that statement, is that my mother, aka Hips, to anyone who regularly tunes into this
Hi,
program.
Hips.
Yes, hello Hips if you're watching. I don't think she's watching today.
Why is she called it?
Why is she called Hips? We'll explain that later off
Okay,
air because she'll
right.
go mad otherwise.
Right.
But the reason why I'm saying this today, oh, by the way, Hips isn't watching, by the way, because she is probably out for a lunch and I think she's gone to meet a friend for lunch. So enjoy. But if you are watching, it's very good to have you on board. It's nice to know that at least Mother listens.
Yeah, and
as opposed to
you
listen
were
with Mother.
proposed to this morning
But-
as well. What would you think about that?
Well, quite. But the point is that my mother, I think by her own admission, doesn't necessarily love herself for who she is, in mainly appearance, which I don't personally agree with. You know, I happen to love my mother regardless of appearance, and I also happen to think that it's completely over-exaggerated, because most people who see her think of her in exactly the way that I believe she is, a very glamorous individual who does not look her age, and certainly doesn't act her age either, but let's not dwell on that. But she is absolutely full of love towards others, especially her friends, especially her family. She's very, very good at loving others, but yet she doesn't love herself. So it is possible, I think, that you can love others without necessarily loving yourself first.
She must have some form of self-love if she's radiating. Yes, it will be in there.
But I wouldn't know
talking
how
about,
that is.
You're
I wouldn't
talking
know what
about
it is.
vanity. You're talking about appearance, aren't you? Self-love is not that. Self-love is something I had to be taught. It's the first thing they teach you when you go into any psychological college. It's the first thing they keep talking to you about it until you actually understand what it means. That any hurt that you've had you cannot move on in a different wavelength unless you deal with it. As if you don't love yourself, you don't know how to love anybody else. It means to protect yourself. Don't go looking for trouble in the places where you were hurt before. To take the journey inwards and understand what makes you calm. You're not to go wild.
So let's pick up on this then. If you're saying that one has to learn to love themselves first, I want to know, if you listening right now, do you love yourself? Just answer me that one question. Do you love yourself?
What does it mean to love oneself?
Inner confidence.
But what is that? Like, is that waking up in the morning and going, I feel great?
Well, look at the way I behave then. Okay, I know that
Do you love yourself, though,
Yes,
truly?
but it's taken me a long, long time.
Do we have to use that as the barometer?
What? The way
We
I
said, look
behave?
at the way I behave.
Yes, you do. Because I do love
Do
myself.
you love yourself?
I think so.
But not in this...
Dennis?
It's just...
I do love myself. I'm
There's-
narcissistic.
Okay, right. But Dennis is the narcissist of the family.
No,
Very
I'm
good.
only joking.
So I don't know. You've got a brighter shade of red now. You regret saying that.
You're redder than me.
We can, confuse that with narcissism.
It's taken a long time, and I don't completely love myself. I still get insecure. I think, well,
Does anyone completely love themselves, do you think?
when you go on further into the spiritual path, and you'll meet the gurus and so on, yes, they do. But I am a quarter of the way there, and it took me years and years to find out about it. Self-love. I don't put myself in harm's way anymore. If I'm hurt, I will read about it. I'll do whatever I can, but I don't go out to put myself in harm's way to get rid of the fear and the pain that I have, because I'll go straight back into it again.
Well, I'm afraid, speaking of fear and pain, I fear we have to go to an ad break, how much of a pain it is.
Cup
See
of
you
tea,
after the
darling.
break. Love one, thank you.
Right, sweetie.
You're listening to
Men's radio station where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
I was going to say, if you could only see what goes on in the studio when the ad breaks on, but of course you can. You might not be able to hear it, but if you watch us on Facebook Live, you absolutely will be able to see the antics that we get up to. It's most extraordinary, most unprofessional, I'm quite sure. You'd have this at the BBC. Anyway, I am delighted to say that we have managed to fix the gremlins, and we can now talk to Dr. Peter Marshall, who's a psychologist, polymath, author, regional chairman of Mensa. I was a member of Mensa, I couldn't be bothered to renew the membership, and much, much more. That was a joke, by the way. Dr. Peter, can you hear us?
I can hear you, Russ, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. No, Russ is off sick, you see. I'm afraid you're stuck with yours truly, Phil Dave, in for us, Kane. But don't you worry about that. I will forgive you on this occasion. I don't know whether or not Russ will. But
okay,
Dr. Peter, it's very, very good of you to speak to us on Men's Radio Station today. Thank you very much indeed. I think that there is no introduction that I could do that would actually give enough of an insight as to what it is that you actually do. Because today is curious, because we're sort of going to be speaking to you about the work you do, but also in particular how you've helped a particular individual. But can you please explain a bit more about this, because I'm not sure I'm going to do it justice, so I want you to do that for us.
Are we talking about Tom Morton?
We are indeed talking about Tom, yes.
Right, indeed, yes. Well, I was introduced to Tom several years ago, quite a few years ago actually, 1988 it was. I was a tutor at the University of Lancaster in the Department of Educational Research, and I was introduced to Tom Morton by his agent, who had come to the university to ask if he could be IQ tested because he seemed to have phenomenal intellectual talents. Well, I was the one that did the IQ testing there, so he was put on to me. And I IQ tested him. He did have a high IQ, but in particular, he had an amazing memory because he was performing memory feats in Blackpool at the time. He'd memorized all the telephone numbers of every hotel in Blackpool, and he did other things like this. And I encouraged him to to develop his life generally and his education, you know. But also encourage him to do something more recognizable with his memory, like memorizing the pi constant, which he did and tried for the British record on a number of occasions. I witnessed him memorizing the pi constant to over 16,000 digits, which is quite
and
incredible.
to anyone who doesn't actually realize or know what pi is ultimately a mathematical equation. Is that right? There's an infinite number, so it actually goes on in an infinite capacity. Good gracious!
I can do about 3.141.
You can do 4. Okay, I can't even do that. So there you go. So very good. So he clearly was from a very early time in which, I'm not saying early age because I don't know how old he was, but from an early time when you met him, clearly displaying signs of being, I suppose the word is different.
Very different, yeah, that's right. He was actually 27 when he came to us. He had recently arrived back in the UK from a charity event. He'd cycled all around Europe, every country of Europe, on a butcher's bike.
Good gracious! But that was actually that wasn't because he was necessarily being sponsored. That was just a passing hobby.
He's just doing it for charity.
So he was okay. No, so I was going to say, as long as there was actually a reason behind it. So
he's a chap that's continuously testing himself, you know.
And what does look when it comes to that? Because that's actually sort of quite a curious way of putting things, testing oneself. Because I don't know whether or not if we, as human beings, deliberately, and I'm guessing you'll know this a bit better than I will, whether or not we deliberately test ourselves, A, enough, or B, too much. Because I'm guessing that there is a bit of a fine balance between both. That, you know, for example, with me, I know that the way I put myself to the test is the way I behave on radio. I'm testing myself right now. My ability to communicate on radio, for me, determines my ability to communicate in life. And therefore, I am putting myself to the test to see that if I can endure 3 hours of virtually talking to myself, obviously there are other people, thank goodness, for the listener's sake, there are other people involved. But would you say that it's a fair assumption to say that people can either test themselves too much or not enough?
It depends entirely on the individual. Some people are very competitive, not only with other people, but also with themselves. And other people are just happy to be chilled. It doesn't really matter. It depends entirely on the individual. But, you know, Tom is a kind of chap that does like to push himself to the limits and test his own ability, you know.
Okay, so let's look a little further at Tom's story, because you being introduced to Tom had to be for a reason. Why were you introduced? Was there any particular way in which that you were asked to, say, better understand Tom, or was it that he was in need of your help? What was it? Why were you introduced to him?
Well, I was introduced to him by his agent, who got him the gigs, you know, to do his memory performances. I think he wanted him to be IQ tested for publicity reasons, you know. But I encouraged Tom to develop other aspects of his education, and I thought, you know, he could go a lot further. And I mean, now Tom does something entirely different. He's a creative person, and he's got this business in waxwork in Blackpool now, making waxworks, which you know, at some time in the future maybe he can tell you more about.
But one of your particular publications is entitled "Unlocking Your Potential." So would you say that that was part and parcel of your instruction to Tom, was to help him realise his full potential? And
absolutely, yes.
Now, so how does one go about that? Because that is clearly a great mystery of life, is, I believe anyway, that an individual doesn't necessarily realise what they're capable of until they're either A, put in that situation, or B, go and try and find that situation for themselves.
Also important to one's self-love.
Absolutely. Nothing limits us more than our own self-doubts. We're all capable of a great deal more than most of us think we are. In fact, we're all capable. We're all capable of a great deal more.
But what's the barometer for that? Because not wishing to quote cliche, but talk about know thy limits. How does one know the limits until they reach them?
Well, the thing is, there probably are no limits, you know. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever reached the total limit of their potential. I mean, nobody's ever used the entirety of their brain. The brain is an incredible organ that has incredible potential, and I don't think anybody's ever actually used the totality of it, with some exceptions, I suppose. There was a mnemonist in Russia many years ago called Shereshevsky, who had an unusual and rather debilitating memory ability, because he could never forget anything. He remembered absolutely everything, and eventually it killed him, you know. But the only way he could relieve himself from his brain overheating, so to speak, was he used to have to, if he wanted to forget something, he used to write it on a blackboard and then rub it out, you know, and that sort of masked it over, you know. So maybe his brain abnormality did have the potential to reach limits, but it was very unusual. I mean, thankfully, there are very few people like that. I'd never heard of another one like that.
No, well, I was going to say, I vaguely remember reading or watching something about Shereshevsky. I've forgotten his name, but I do actually sort of vaguely remember. But with what I'm particularly interested in is why it is that we as humans are so incapable of forgetting what ought to be forgotten. In other words, why is it that it's traumatic experiences, whether they be physical or verbal, that stick with us, and yet the nice things, more often than not, are what are parked to one side? What is it about the human brain that makes us dwell on the negative? In your experience, I mean, even if you don't necessarily have the answer to it per se.
No, I could answer it in several ways, really. From a biological point of view, it's more important for an organism to remember the nasty things than it is to remember the nice things, because our brain essentially is given us to help us survive. We don't need it to do that too much in our modern civilized life, but in our wild state, our brain would be to help us stay alive. So it's much more important for it to be able to remember the nasty things than the nice things, the dangers, rather than the nice things, you know. But in addition to that, some people, mood comes into it. You know, some people have a condition that causes them to dwell on the negative, you know, more, and therefore those kinds of memories are going to come into our mind much more. But, you know, some people unwillingly self-persecute, you know. But then there is the post-traumatic stress disorder, which is where people are pretty seriously affected by past memories. But that, you know, again, the reason the brain stores those is because they've been so dangerous that it makes them permanent, so that if you get close to those situations again, you'll avoid them, you know.
Dr. Peter Marshall, this is all fascinating stuff, and I very much want to carry on this conversation, but alas, we have to go and pay the rent. So make no mistake, we will come back to you in just a moment's time. You are listening to Men's Radio Station with Phil Dave, in for Ross Kane with James Blake. Our guest, Dr. Peter Marshall, will still be here. I hope you will be too, the other side of this.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk Download the men's group's ground rules, download the men's group's check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental wealth and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
It's Phil Dave in for Russ Kane here on Men's Radio Station alongside James Blake. And on the line still is our first guest for today's show, Dr. Peter Marshall. He's a psychologist, a polymath and author, a regional chairman of Mensa. And that's what I particularly want to focus on with you now, Dr. Peter Marshall, because before we run out of time, I'm very aware that time does run away with us. I've always been fascinated by Mensa. I've never, unfortunately, qualified for it, despite various attempts at IQ. Sadly, I'm not quite there. However, I've always wondered whether or not there is an element of pressure when one is in Mensa, because I can't help but believe that a certain standard is expected of an individual who is Mensa qualified. Do you ever feel the pressure of being a part of such an exclusive organisation?
No, not at all.
Oh, well, it makes you even more depressed then, doesn't it, really, for goodness sakes? It is me, sort of non-member Mensa here.
Not loving yourself.
There's no pressure at all on anyone in Mensa.
But do you not think from society, though? Because bearing in mind the mainstream of society is not necessarily Mensa qualified.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely include myself in this. I don't consider myself to have a low IQ, but at the same time, it's not above average. So at the same time, there is, of course, this sort of tussle between the good and the bad. I'm somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, so to speak. And I'm always fascinated by those who are at the top end of the IQ scale and obviously therefore are Mensa qualified. So I've always sort of felt that I have a certain expectation, should we say, of a level of intellect that I wouldn't necessarily expect to see of someone who's quite low in IQ, which sounds terrible, but of course that's what the IQ scale is ultimately for, is to determine our abilities as individuals.
Well, first of all, let me just point out that I'm not the regional chairman of Mensa now. I was years ago.
Okay.
I'm no longer that. I was also the first research director of the Mensa Foundation for Gifted Children. But going on to the IQ thing, let me first of all say that a high IQ is not important in the modern world, or in the world at all. The world is made for people with an average IQ, and an average IQ will get anybody anywhere that they want to go in achievement. What is equally important is creativity, and they don't always go together, IQ and creativity. Thirdly, what is very important is task commitment. Now, none of these three things tend to be found together in most cases. And they're all, I think, of equal importance. So let me make that clear, that high IQ is useful, but you don't require a gifted level IQ to do anything at all in life. If you've got an average IQ and you work hard and you develop creativity, and let me say that creativity is not inborn. Creativity is developed in childhood from frustration of intentions. If a child gets everything it wants easily, it won't ever develop creativity. If a child has to struggle to get what it wants, it will develop creativity because it has to find ways to get it. Now, as I say, that is completely developed in childhood. You don't have to be born with that, and that is as important as IQ.
That is absolutely fascinating, you say that.
Yeah,
And
but the other thing is, creative people are often rather laid back, and highly intelligent people are often very one-tracked. So if you're going to get anywhere, achieve highly in life, you've got to have task commitment. You've got to have the ability to get the bit between your teeth and refuse to let go until you've got what you want. You've got to have real determination. Now, if you've got real determination and you haven't got a very high level of creativity or high level of intelligence, you can still achieve very highly. So I say it's the combination of these three things that makes a person formidable, and this is what we tend to be particularly interested in the international charity of which I am the president, which is the International Association for High Ability, or IAFA. There is a fourth thing as well that I think is important, and that is, should we call it patronage? The connections. You've got to really have social connections, people to open doors for you. But if you've got these other three abilities, you can get round that. You can mix with the right kind of people, make the right kind of contacts, and get those doors open.
So would you say there is actually an element of truth in that age-old adage when people say that it's not what you know, it's who you know?
Absolutely, it is.
Interesting. So you see, what I was particularly fascinated with just now is when you mentioned about those who are creative tend to have been, I don't know whether your word was deprived as such, but necessarily have had to fight potentially for what they want, maybe fight for attention or whatever it may be. It's really curious that you say that, because for me, if I refer to myself, my family, I have always made it very clear that although I have a sister, I'm not as close to her as many siblings are. Don't get me wrong, we get on considerably better than we ever used to, but it's still very aware there are other siblings who are much closer. And it was, for me, it always felt when growing up that she was the one who got what she wanted, whenever she wanted. And I always thought, hang on a second, why aren't I allowed to do this? Now, even if that's not true, my parents will probably flat out deny it. But what's very telling is that out of the two of us, I'm the one who I would suggest is more creative, and she's the one who is probably more interested in, I wouldn't even say necessarily more interested in intellect, because I don't know if she is, but she's not creative per se. And I think it's by her own admission she's not. She's, and career-wise, she's a school teacher, not denigrating it at all. She works very hard indeed for it. I happen to talk for a living in the form of being a broadcaster and a producer. So with that in mind, you can sort of see how different the paths are. but it almost demonstrates exactly what you were saying. And bearing in mind that I've never spoken to you before, I'm just fascinated by hearing your analysis of that, because it is almost like, for me, you're describing my life growing up.
Absolutely. Rest my case, yeah.
So absolutely. Well, it really is fascinating stuff. Thank you very much indeed. I think that just before we let you go, we should actually sort of tell people, as I mentioned, sort of in almost a throwaway comment before, that you've been responsible for writing, is this correct? You've penned 28 books.
Yes.
I don't even think I've read that. I'm joking, I have read way more than that, but it's a heck of a lot to write. It's fascinating. Anyway, well, I think what we need to do then in that case is need to tell people where they can find out more about you rather than the individual books. So where can people go if they want to read more of your work or any of your work, full stop?
Right. Okay. Go to the website drpetermarshall.com, all in small case, drpetermarshall.com. That is where most of my non-fiction books, which are both academic and popular psychology and self-help books, but also my accountancy books can be found on that. But I also write comedy fiction under the pen name Lars Lampeter, which is spelt Lampheter, Larslampeter, which is an anagram of Peter Marshall. And
fantastic.
you can find those. You can find find out more about the comedy books by going to larslampeter.com website. Of course, there is Lars Lampeter on Facebook. There is my most recent comedy book is The Great Memory Show of 1943, which is a spoof on the Secret Army of Usk, a rather saucy book, really worth reading, or even though I say it myself. The Great Memory Show of 1943, and you can comment on that book on our website or by going to Lars Lampeter Facebook or Lars Lampeter Twitter, or by the email, which is The Great Memory Show of 1943 at outlook.com.
Good Lord.
There are other books. There are other books by Lars Lampeter coming out. The next one is The Harley Street Hypnotist. But you can also find out about my books by simply going onto my Amazon page. Simply go onto Amazon and put in Dr. Peter Marshall, and you'll get my Amazon page. Or, of course, go on to Amazon and put in Lars Lampeter or put in The Great Memory Show of 1943.
Fantastic.
And
so in a nutshell, Dr. Peter Marshall, you are everywhere, and quite rightly so.
Like I said in the show notes, and much more.
Yeah, do you know what? I have got this written in front of me. I can vouch for the truth in that statement. It does say here, Dr. Peter Marshall, psychologist, polymath, author, former regional chairman of Mensa, and much more. And my goodness me.
And General Dog's Body.
And General Dog's Body. Well, I think we've all been there, my friend. But anyway, one way or another, thank you so much indeed for speaking to us on Men's Radio Station today. It's been really fascinating stuff. Very much appreciated. And may I just say, I very much hope that you will join us in person when you feel up to it in the studio next time. Hopefully there will be a next time.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental wealth and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Phil Dave in for Russ Kane with you on Men's Radio Station. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you very much. If you have just tuned in, the studio has descended into a bit of chaos because not only are we about to welcome our next guest in the form of Dr. Tony Ortega, I'm very pleased to say has joined us in the studio. We'll say hello to him in just a moment's time. There's something that must not go unmissed first of all. If you're watching this on Facebook, facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, it may not have escaped your notice that not only is today Valentine's Day, but it is also 2 days before producer James's birthday. Now, being the incredibly overbearing mother that Lady B is, she decided that there was absolutely no way we were going to let this occasion go unmarked. Oh no, sirree, are we letting this go unmarked? So in the traditional style, we have a cake here. We're not going to embarrass you by singing happy birthday because I don't believe anyone in the studio can sing. But we have got a cake here all the same. There we go. Isn't that lovely? We've got a cake all the same. And I've reason to believe that apart from your mother trying to her best to embarrass you, is that we're also going to be enlightened with some of this cake as well, which looks thoroughly unhealthy, but very, very
thoroughly unhealthy.
But very, very delicious indeed.
Right, cutting it for Knuckles. Going to make a wish.
Oh, I would love a piece. Thank you.
There we go. You didn't get this on Hazel's show. Just in case you're wondering, by the way, if you think to yourself that Dr. Tony Ortega looks remotely familiar and you were listening to Women's Radio Station or watching Hazel's program or listening to Hazel's program, I say that's precisely the reason why, is that Tony spoke to Hazel yesterday. So I'm not quite sure when that goes out on Women's Radio Station, but whenever it does go out, you'll get 2 helpings of. And hopefully we'll get 2 helpings of cake. Unbelievable. They've taken the cake out of the studio. What was that for?
Where's my cake?
We were just going to cut it, right? And then, look, I remember. Do you remember the conversation we had off air? Which is, if we do any cake stuff in the studio, it will create a mess. Well, look.
I had to put a stop. I had to put a stop to wanting them to light candles. Make no mistake. They actually, can you believe, in a studio that's surrounded by foam and other flammable things,
and cables,
they wanted to light candles. So which I'm not really the biggest fan of health and safety, but I did have to put my foot down on that one. Anyway, Dr. Tony Ortega, clinical psychologist and author of, I love this title, Are You Here Yet? So, I think first things too, tell us a little bit about... No, let's dive in at the deep end.
Let's go. Let's
straight
do it.
for the deep end.
Let's do it.
Are you here yet?
I believe I am.
What is it?
So
tell us. Where does the title come from, and what is the content of the book that would make you ask the question, are you here yet?
It's kind of like an unofficial sequel to my first book, Is He Here Yet? Where that book focused on dating and relationships. And so this one takes a much more global perspective on how we operate in the world and how we show up for ourselves. And the reason why the subtitle says STFU is, I think that we
spend... Get a bit personal, do you mind? Have you just met?
Sorry. I'm kind of like that. We
transatlantic folk.
Anyway. I know, right? Us Americans.
Here comes the cake, by the way.
Oh, the cake is back. Yay.
Yes.
How are we going to eat it?
Absolutely no idea. I don't think we thought this one through, but you know what? It doesn't really matter. It's fine.
It looks fabulous.
Luckily, we're about to redecorate the studio in a couple of weeks' time. So, if there's any mess, we'll clear up. Don't worry. But anyway, sorry. Yes, and this is much more on a global scale.
It's much more on a global scale and really talks about how we just complain too much and we just need to take action. And the book takes a very no-holds-barred, street level, in your face. This is what you could do. Shut up and do the work.
Which is all well and good in probably a more pragmatic world. But the truth is that we live in much more of a dogmatic world, I find anyway. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I would agree with that.
So how do you get people to go about thinking that way? I mean, obviously, I'm guessing just part of it is reading the book.
Absolutely.
But then surely there's got to be a will, a determination, a want to read the book in the first place.
I would say so. But I think, where the book starts off with, listen, you've got everything it takes. You just got to reach in and grab it, and you just got to do it. Got to stop relying on everything outside of you, relationships, cars, jobs, social media likes. Know that you already have everything it takes.
Do you know what? I don't want to be too cliche, considering that we have actually just been handed a piece of cake on a plate. But do we live in a society where everything is handed on a plate and therefore everyone is far more expectant of stuff just to come their way?
You nailed it right there. With social media, with technology, we don't have to work for anything anymore, do we? I was fascinated one day on the subway where I saw an advertisement for an app that delivers alcohol. And I
just say, that's filth. I've just had some cake.
It looks lovely.
Good. That is, wow. Anyway, I do apologise.
That's quite
Advert
all right.
on the underground that was offering to deliver alcohol.
Alcohol. So it's like we don't even need to leave the house to get smashed. I mean,
I haven't had to leave the house for years to get smashed personally. But anyway, keep going. I'm listening.
But, we have to go out and go to the liquor store and then come back. But here is an app that delivers alcohol to your house. And I found that to really speak to the state of the current world where, we don't have to lift a finger, just a swipe and a tap.
Instant gratification.
Yeah.
Instant gratification. And for me, one of the worst inventions, as much as I absolutely love it, and I'm a hypocrite because I've used it myself, is the service Amazon Prime. Because if you have a look at what that's done... No, but if you have a look at what that's done, and I'm not denigrating Amazon, let's make it very clear, Amazon are not here to defend themselves, and I'm not knocking them. I actually think it's a terrific service. If you think about it, put it to the test. You can order virtually anything and get virtually anything to your doorstep the next day. That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. But what has it done to society?
It's gotten us lazy.
It's got us incredibly lazy.
Well, and do you know in Manhattan, in New York City proper... in certain areas, you can get Amazon delivery within 4 hours.
So what I was going to say, that with the slow but sure introduction of drone technology, which of course they are going to do more rapidly across the globe, there's certainly in America they're trialling it all over the place, and before long they will trial it in the UK as well. It's already been announced they're going to be doing that in the near future. When that happens, absolutely, it'll be a matter of hours away before we can get stuff. How much quicker do we want our world, in whatever capacity, to change? And it is teaching us that we can get things done in an instant. It's not normal. I think it's dangerous.
I think it's very dangerous because, then we expect that for our own growth as individuals, as human beings. I mean, even if you take fitness as an example, very concrete, example, you can't do a set of bicep curls and expect these huge biceps. You got to continue to do that. But unfortunately, this is very subtle programming that today's society has where Amazon Prime, alcoholdelivery.com, whatever it was, we feel like we don't have to do the work.
No, it's absolutely unbelievable. And I can't tell you, people have no idea how hard I work for this one pack. I'm telling you, right? They think that this is a gift. I worked hard to make myself look like this. But anyway, look, I'm being absolutely serious, okay? It does bother me terribly because I've seen it with my own eyes. Even without wanting to sound like an old so-and-so, and I could easily do so. I'm in danger of sounding like this. I know I'm guilty of it myself. I'm 33 years old, 34 later this year, and yet I look at my career and I think, hang on, this is not where I want to be. I was absolutely determined by the age of 30 that I'd be broadcasting on a reputable radio station virtually full-time in speech-based radio. Totally and utterly unrealistic. Let me tell you, because there's one person, and I've worked with quite a few people in the radio industry, one person I know who is only just under the age of 30, who is full-time in speech radio.
But who put that in your head that it had to be by the age of 30?
Me. Okay. I put it in my head. I put it in my head because I was so determined. I was so wanting that, dare I say, instant gratification, where I was so convinced that I would absolutely do what I needed to do by the age of 30, where of course it's a totally unrealistic prospect.
Is that instant gratification, or is that setting a goal then trying to achieve? It might be an unrealistic goal, but at least, what is it they say, shoot for the stars and land on the moon or something? But I think it stems from, and obviously I think Dr. Tony's going to know this better than I would, but I think it stems from a learned behaviour of instant gratification because of living in the world that I do and knowing that, let's take for example the humble email. Look at an email. Now what happens? When we send a correspondence to somebody, we expect them to reply the same day. And it was not that long ago. I remember the days when you had to send a letter and you'd wait up to a week before you got that letter back with whatever action needed to be taken with it. It wasn't that long ago. But now, thanks to email, we expect it the same day, if not within a couple of hours. It's absolutely unbelievable.
Or minutes with text messages.
And now, of course, nowadays, let's not forget that with the age of mobile technology, where we are never out of the office, not truly, we can put an out of office on, but make no mistake, we're always in the office. It's absolutely bizarre. And actually, in some weird way, I'm sorry to keep bringing you back to radio, but it's kind of true with radio as well. It's because now people can do programs virtually anywhere in the world. Recall a time not so long ago when, through no fault of anyone, unfortunately we couldn't use our studios here at Men's Radio Station, and we had to broadcast the program on the spot from a park about a mile away.
Wow.
And that's what we did. And it's because we could. And it was so bizarre. Anyone else, back in the day, any radio station would just shut down. That was it. You couldn't go on air today, but we could do it. And it's because of what technology has done. I'm fascinated by this. I absolutely love this subject. Dr. Tony Ortega, I promise you're going to speak more after the break. I've waffled, but my God, we're going to hear much more from you. And we'll hopefully hear from you as well. Do get in contact with us if anything that we've said has resonated. 0203 290 4411. That's 0203 290 4411. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, and Twitter and Instagram, it's at Men's Radio STN. Phil, Dave, in for Russ Kane, along with James Blake, our guest, Dr. Tony Ortega, with you after this.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
And talking is most definitely the name of the game. That is what we want you to do. It's what you need to do right here at Men's Radio Station. It's precisely the reason why Russ Kane and Howard Jameson started Men's Radio. So the least you could do is not only lend us your ears, but lend us your thoughts as well. We would love to hear from you this afternoon. It is 0203 290 4411 is the telephone number, and all the social media remains the same. It's facebook.com/Men's Radio STN and Twitter and Instagram at Men's Radio STN. Our guest in the studio this afternoon is Dr. Tony Ortega, who is over here from New York City, no less, which is very exciting. I actually just mean that it's exciting that he's from New York, because I love New York. But all the same, we're very happy to have you here.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Clinical psychologist and author of Are You Here Yet? So we've established a little bit about Are You Here Yet? And what I want to establish now is much more about how you got into the fascinating world of psychology, because I've always had, for as long as I can remember, a true fascination with psychology. I think that's actually why I've ended up on Men's Radio Station, is because I genuinely have this great love and interest and curiosity into the way the mind works, and what we think are actually conscious decisions could easily be subconscious decisions.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it dates back to, so I'm of Cuban heritage. My parents came over in 1962 and settled in Miami. And one of my grandmother's friends, her name was Olympia, was a psychologist in Cuba and unfortunately was not able to translate her degree here in the over there at the United States. And so she ended up being a maintenance person at Burger King, and she would tell me stories at a very young age about being a psychologist. And I was absolutely fascinated. I'm like, wait a minute, you can get paid to help people. And I just found it fascinating.
Which is funny, because when you put it like that, it actually makes it sound like a dream job.
It was perfect. And so I started off, I had a passion for substance abuse counseling, and that's where I started my career back in 1982.
To which we say impossible.
It's been a while.
Fluent in schmooze, obviously.
So, and then what I've come to really learn about mental health is, and listening certainly to what the clients have to bring, but really it's about empowering. I think certain schools of psychology don't do enough of the empowering and stay in the talking and talking and talking and talking. At some point, we've got to get out of the problem and get into the solution, whatever that is. And that could be through psychiatric medicine, that could be through cognitive behavioral therapy. But at some point, I want to give folks a way out or a way above, really.
Was there any experience, though, in your life per se that sort of affirmed your decision to go down this particular route? You talk about your relative who sort of wasn't able to go down the psychology route for one reason or another. By the sound of it, sadly, it sounds like a language barrier problem was the reason, which is, I think, painfully sad, because you often hear stories about those who, in their home country, which sounds like a horrible thing to say, because many people where they end up, they treat as their home country, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Where they originally come from, they could have clearly had a job that is of a much more elevated level to the mainstream, and yet, just because a small matter of not being able to communicate, which I say small matter like it's a minor detail, means that they can't translate it and do potentially what they love doing.
Well, what they spent their entire life studying. I guess for me, it was in my 20s. I lived in Miami during the Scarface area, if anybody remembers that movie with Al Pacino. And I went through a period of time where I struggled with drugs. I'm going to be real honest with that. And I just found that traditional substance abuse counseling just wasn't really cutting it for me. And I was able to overcome it through various means, and that just really gave me the emphasis of this is what I need to do, and that's why the beginnings of my career were mostly in substance abuse counseling.
Now, MRS has a very simple yet effective rule. We ask the questions that most other stations wouldn't dream of asking, but we also have a golden rule that if you do not want to answer it, you tell us to get lost.
Okay.
When you say substance abuse, was it using or was it dealing?
It was using. For 4 years, I had a pretty bad cocaine problem. I mean, living in Miami was easily accessible, super cheap, and it was almost like trendy. So what ended up being like a weekend thing, as with any addiction, just grew and grew and grew until finally I hit my bottom because I was basically getting high every day, not sleeping for 3 and 4 days. Just ragged. I was 140 pounds. It was gross.
And now?
And now, I have not, it's centuries, of course, since I've touched it, but I'm about 175 pounds, work out every day, try to eat healthy, except for this cake we just gobbled.
Yeah, I do apologize. I'm so sorry. Obviously, we are here to promote men's health and well-being, and we've just ultimately just stuffed our guest full of cake.
It's good for our
do
well-being.
Apologize. Well, it may be for a quick fix, but ultimately...
Well, listen, my Ukrainian personal trainer might have something to say about that when I get back.
You know what? I don't necessarily want to go down this route, because actually I really believe that this is a whole other topic in itself. But sugar, refined sugar, is, I believe, a legal drug. Let's be honest.
Oh, absolutely.
It's highly addictive, and yet people don't treat it in the same way that they do Class A's.
Yep.
It's the most peculiar thing, because it really is quite addictive stuff and quite dangerous. Okay, look, let's not dwell on sugar, because that's obviously not what we are.
That is not mentioned anywhere. I don't usually consume sugar, so I don't have much to say about it.
Excellent. No, that's good news. But okay, so let's talk about where your work has taken you now.
Okay.
Where are you at in some? I don't mean obviously at a men's radio station studio, but I mean what do you do work-wise now? How have you found your own experiences and translated that into hopefully helping others, I imagine?
So I identify as gay, and I came out at 29. And one of the things I wish I had when I was coming out was someone who could kind of like mentor me, a mental health professional. And, I encountered many competent mental health professionals, but all of them identified as heterosexual. And there was still kind of like that barrier that I couldn't, overcome. And certainly, I came out of it, a lot harder than I could have if I had the right professionals. And I don't blame them at all. They were amazing people. And so when I relocated to New York to finish my doctorate, this one lovely, lovely chap who lives out in Long Island, and I worked in Brooklyn, super far. And
are you still in Brooklyn now?
I'm still in Brooklyn now.
Which, of course, is a hive of different backgrounds and
the people you encounter in Brooklyn.
It's extraordinary. And actually, do you know what? Even though I have to confess, the total length of my time in New York to date is only 4 days. I'm ashamed to say.
But well, you got to come over. I'll take you out.
Make no mistake. There's an offer on Valentine's Day as well, people.
There you go.
I think you've been proposed to twice today.
Do you know what? Today is a good day. I'm just saying. But absolutely, the fact that only 4 days of being there, and I can instantly tell, I've just got so much love for that city. It's amazing.
It's such an alive city. Like I think I've lived there 12 years, and I don't think I've ever said I'm bored.
It's a bit like London, really. Londoners, on the other hand, can be boring, but London is not a bored city.
This is an amazing city.
Yeah, but I think actually London and New York are kindred spirits, let's be honest. They're very, very similar in many ways.
I agree.
The only difference is, of course, is that we have corners. But other than that, I've never known anything like it. The roads in New York are just straight lines. It's the most bizarre thing.
It is very bizarre.
I mean, whoever built that grid system, that really confuses me. Seriously. Because I go by landmarks. I go by landmarks only. So as much as I understand that sort of if you live on Fifth Avenue on 142nd Street or whatever it is, I get that. That's all well and good. But actually, my brain doesn't work like that. For me, I'm much more about pictorial. Yeah. So I can actually sort of relate to landmarks. There are virtually no landmarks, I'm just saying.
Absolutely not.
So, but
What is it? Is it streets are the ones that go up and avenues are the ones that go across? Or
That's
something
correct,
like that?
yes.
Yeah. That's like all I know about that system. I've never been to New York.
It is
either,
literally
so.
a giant grid.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Very, very interesting. Any odd way. What's also very interesting is the work that you do. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because in particular, with the work I'd imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong here, because, a lot of the time I do an awful lot of presuming, but hey, I get by. But with somewhere like New York, being the melting pot it is, means that there will be people who are not necessarily just going with the status quo. And would you say, is it fair comment to suggest that New York, maybe a bit like I believe London does compared to the rest of the UK, has maybe more of its fair share of problems for those who are susceptible to, say, something like substance abuse, or maybe those who are more susceptible to the pressures that mental health can play a part of?
That is 100% correct. I think, particularly what I find in working with LGBT clients and with gay men in specific, because that's my main population, crystal meth is just running rampant in the gay community. So
why is that, do you think, or do you not know?
It's crystal meth has this way of just allowing you to be like that feral sexual being that gay men have been taught not to be, or we're expected to be, right? And so it just gives them this freedom to do whatever they want and just overcome all of that internalized shame and internalized homophobia. But there's of course other drugs in other communities that run rampant. But what I'm seeing a lot of is folks who are identifying mental health issues a lot sooner and getting the support they need. And it all depends. I don't know how the insurance system is here in the UK, but
expensive.
Expensive. Well, a lot of folks are eligible for state-funded plans. So, and I'm one of the few in New York City that take insurance. So I'm always full. But it's accessibility sometimes is an issue for folks, because like I said, a lot of folks want to be cash only, and who could afford $125 a week, every week?
Let's not talk case specific here, because obviously it wouldn't be right, it wouldn't be fair. But let's imagine that a client believes that they need your help. How do you recognize someone, apart from potentially if they are LGBTQ+ or anything like that? How do you recognize them as being someone who needs your help and someone who you are prepared to help?
Well, one of the things I do is I on my website, I have an intake form that they could fill out online, and there's very targeted questions that allow me to be like, oh, okay, is this person serious about seeking services for mental health? Because some people I've had literally call my office and they're like, oh, I've always wanted to see a mental health professional and I wanted to make an appointment. And it's like, honey, this isn't, because it's trendy. This is a service that you need. So I definitely tease that out that way.
Fantastic. Well, do you know what? Coming up in just a moment's time, we're going to, if it's okay, we're going to hang on to you.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't want you to go just yet. But coming up in just a moment's time, we are going to put to you our question that we've been putting forward to our listeners for today, or listener in the singular. I don't know. I don't like to be too presumptuous, as you can't tell. But all the same, we have been asking whether or not we believe that love is important for the state of our mental health and well-being. Obviously, today is Valentine's Day, so it's a very apt question. It is still a question that I want you to answer, so if you are listening, I would like you to call us on 0203 290 4411. Tell us what you believe love does for your mental health and well-being, and whether or not you believe that you are better or worse off with or without love. If you follow that, you're a better man than I am. But 0203 290 4411 is the telephone number. On social media, facebook.com/Men's Radio STN, and on Twitter and on Instagram, it's at Men's Radio STN. This is Phil Dave, in for Russ Kane, who is unwell today. So if you have tuned in, you thought, hang on, where's Russ? Well, that's why. It's because he's not feeling too clever. But all the same, Phil Dave, alongside James Blake, our guest in the studio, Dr. Tony Ortega, is also here as well. We'll still be here the other side of this.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Men indeed really do talk here.
We talk a little bit too much, it seems.
Possibly during the ad break as well, when we actually probably should be paying attention to what's going out on air, but all the same, we hope that you bear with us and recognise that it's actually just because we do like a good old natter here at Men's Radio Station. Phil Dave in for Ross Kane, James Blake sitting alongside me, and our guest, Dr. Tony Ortega, is in the studio as well. We've been hearing about his fascinating career and his amazing book, Are You Here Yet? But I want to focus a little bit more now on what we've actually been putting to the listener today, which is we've been asking whether or not love is good or bad for one's mental health and well-being. Because arguably there are many pros and cons to loving another and actually being in love with someone else. And I just wonder whether or not through the work that you do in psychology, or whether or not you've actually sort of seen, not necessarily people admitting it as such, but maybe with your own eyes, that you've actually witnessed the benefits and the detrimental effects that love can have on an individual.
Well, it all depends how you're defining it. So the moment you posed that question, I went back to any lecture by Marianne Williamson where she'll talk about there's only two emotions, love and fear.
And Marianne Williamson, of course, being, to anyone who doesn't know?
I'm sorry. She is a speaker. She speaks on Course in Miracles, and she actually tried to run for president for a little bit, but the United States was not ready for a spiritually inclined presidential candidate, which boggles my mind.
Or indeed female president. Clearly.
Exactly. Don't even get me started.
I know. How forward-thinking can we get? I know. Let's have all male presidents. Anyway, let's not go on that. But anyway. Right.
So I think, it's how we conceptualize love. When we think love and it's Valentine's Day, immediately we go towards romantic love and partnered love. How about let's take the whole notion of love as a greater appreciation of who we are, where we are, right here, right now. So to answer your question, if that's how we conceptualize love, then yes, it's actually, it will help anyone's mental health. Because as RuPaul says at the end of every episode, if you can't love yourself, how in the hell are you going to love anybody else?
But that's the basic principle, right, isn't it?
But there we go. You see. Yeah. And actually, it was our goddess of the green room, James Blake's mother, Deborah Blake.
She's lovely.
Lady B.
I love her.
Who just looks after us like there is no tomorrow. She is amazing, and we very much love her for it. But she was the one who said herself earlier on this very program, if you can't love yourself, how can you possibly love someone else?
And you know, and certainly that love doesn't have to be this like amazing appreciation of who you are, but at least some general knowledge and some general like, you know what, I'm not that bad of a person because look at the people around me. Look what I've been able to do.
Well, it's things like positive affirmations, right, that are really good for that. It's waking up and not beating yourself up. It's waking up and giving yourself, you know, good thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts, right? And building on top of that and loving yourself, telling yourself that you're worth something. I mean, I'm not an expert.
But you start off with realistic stuff like, you know, I don't have the job that I want, but the job I'm doing right now is actually helping other people. So it's allowing both things to exist. I mean, we don't want to poo-poo the negative stuff because then we're just kind of bypassing, but let's add in something that's realistic. You know, hey, I don't have a six-pack, but I'm 20 pounds lighter than I was a year ago. You know, something like that. So that's
very much about positive mental attitude.
Positive reframing, just, you know, let's pull out whatever positive, even if it's like, you know, hey, that one tooth in my mouth, boy, it's a stunner. You know, something simple.
Well, what can I say? Just give us a smile. But in all seriousness, I think that to tell someone to accentuate the positive when they are potentially quite a negative individual in the first place, I have to stress that I consider myself very lucky. I am a very positive individual. More often than not, I will see the positive in everything. I'm a great believer in fate, so I think what will be will be. If something bad happens, it's happened for a reason. I don't go blaming him upstairs, sitting on his white cloud with a big fluffy beard. None of that. I believe that actually it's important to recognize that you are answerable to a higher being, not because you believe in myth, but actually because it teaches you to please others, be the best that you can be, and actually realize that having a bit of faith goes a long way in helping you in everyday life.
I love that attitude. Love it.
And so, but then I consider myself lucky to have that. And I know so many who don't. So many who see the negative in every aspect of life. You know, whatever comes their way, even if they'd had a lottery win, they'll say, oh, this might change me as a person. Do you know what I mean? It's things like that. And it's really, it boggles me. I don't understand how people get by.
I will tell you, one of my thinking about that is that I think that people who want to stay in the negative are too scared to find the positive because that's unknown. That's not familiar. But this negativity, this Debbie Downer that I live in, I know this and I know this very, very well. So now I don't have to take responsibility to make any change. I stay exactly safe in this negative bubble. And this is all happening subconsciously, by the way. I am not, making fun or minimizing anyone's pain. But I think that that's the benefit of it all, that we get to stay exactly where we're at. And I don't have to take responsibility for my own life and shake my fist at God.
It's a comfort zone thing, right? I don't want to come out of my comfort zone. I'm used to being this person. I don't want to. Was it I don't want to be here yet.
Yeah, but hang on a second. But surely the definition of comfort is something that comforts you. And I don't understand sort of how, and this is me being very inward looking, I don't understand how looking at everything with such a negative pair of eyes and feeling so down in the dumps about everything is a comfort. But how is that a comfort?
It's comfortable because it's familiar.
Yeah.
Because it's familiar. We're used to it.
But just because we're used to it doesn't mean that it's a comfort, does it?
There's a certain comfort in the familiarity. Hey, how many people do you know that are in bad relationships that won't leave because the thought of starting to date again is so petrifying? This I know. I know this is a bad relationship. All of that unknown, I don't know what's going on. That is too scary for me to even think about.
Even though it's bad, it's like the unknown is a fear of the unknown. It's a scary thing. So you're like, right, I'll take the bad. At least I know what I'm dealing with, but I don't want to change that. For someone like you, Like, I get that. I know you. You're like, this is not right. This is not comfortable for me. But for other people, it's like I said, it's just consistency. It's like taking the same route to work every day.
So you see, for me, I'll give you an example. There's someone I know who will remain nameless because it's not very fair to them, but they very much believe that positive thinking is dangerous because if whatever they are being positive about turns out to be unhappy and nasty at the end of it, then they would just be left disappointed. They can't cope with the prospect of that disappointment. Yet my argument to that is, why be miserable en route? Because even if something terrible happens, okay, let's just say, I'm going to give an example that maybe a pet isn't very well, okay?
Mm-hmm.
If your pet is being tested for something, and yet you don't know whether or not the test results are going to come back in a good way or a bad way, but you think badly about those results in a bid to avoid disappointment when the results come back bad, if indeed they do. My argument to that is that you'll be miserable en route, and you'll be even more miserable once the results come through as negative.
Well, and then you're negating the other 50% chance that the results are going to be perfectly fine.
Because they don't exist.
Right.
That's the whole point.
No, neither
in
result
that world
exists yet.
But so my argument exactly, you can't react to what you don't know what you're reacting to. But yet evidently this in particular individual, and there are others, who clearly...
Why'd you look at me?
No, because I'm including you in the conversation, but if you want me to ignore you, I'll ignore you. But no, there are others who do think like that, and I find it mind-blowing. I really do, and I'm not trying to be sort of selfish here to sort of say, I'm the only, my only opinion is the one that matters. But I struggle to understand, because I think it comes out of feeling so desperately sorry for anyone who is incapable, genuinely incapable, of having, and it sounds so cliche now, but that positive mental attitude in life.
They're
it's
too
just
scared
essential. To. It's so important, especially in the day and age in which we live. And I think there's a massive part of me that blames the mollycoddling society in which we live in now. Everyone is protected. Everyone's wrapped in cotton wool. Look at what health and safety has done to this country. Okay, I'm about to go off my high horse here. Look at what health and safety has done to this country in the way that people are told now that they can't even put up a ladder on the street without putting cones around it in case someone bangs their head on this ladder. What happens with that? That teaches you that accidents won't happen. That teaches you that don't worry, no matter what you do in this life, you'll be protected. And it also teaches you don't look out for yourself because we've got your back. There are so many things that teaches people in such a bad way that all people are actually worried about is the suing culture. They're terrified that if someone was to bang their head on that ladder, of what would happen to them as an organisation, to the detriment of people's ability to be okay with themselves and to look after themselves. I think we need to pick up on this. I don't want you to go anywhere.
Okay, I'm not going anywhere.
We're on the brink. We're on the brink of saying that we're going to let you go because I know you've got to get to Vauxhall, which I think anyone in their right mind needs time to prepare for. But all the same, we're going to hang on to you a bit longer.
Okay.
And we're hopefully going to hang on to you as well. Don't go anywhere. You are listening to Men's Radio Station with Phil Dave, in for Russ Kane, alongside James Blake. And in just a moment's time, we'll welcome back the Goddess of the Green Room and Mr. Social Media, and maybe even our next guest. Don't go anywhere.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol. whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's radio station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Indeed, men really do talk, and you may see from watching on Facebook that the studio has suddenly got a little more crowded for the last hour. I can't believe we're on the last hour of today's show already. We are flying by quite happily. It is Men's Radio Station with Phil Dave in for Russ Kane. Sitting alongside me is producer James Blake, who, everyone, for the record, one more hour, we can say this on this show, is he's 24 years old. Because, of course, his birthday is on Sunday, which we have been marking quite appropriately with the most sugar-fested cake you've ever seen, and so much so that I'm slightly concerned that Lady B's duties, the goddess of the green room, who's also in the studio, by the way, is going to end up having to take me off the ceiling in order to leave the building. But let's not dwell on that. Still in the studio with us is Dr. Tony Ortega, clinical psychologist and author of Are You Here Yet? He's most definitely here. If you have not been listening for the last 45 minutes of him being here, frankly, you've missed out big time. But all the same, he's still with us for a little bit longer. We're very grateful to him for that. We were talking before about whether or not love is able to encourage us to be the better people that we can be, or best individuals that we can be. And we were talking about how it's all about positive mental attitude. But I wonder whether or not also it's a generational thing. Is it possible that newer generations, in other words, millennial, generation, what do they call them now?
I think it's Z now?
Generation Z, Generation Z, whatever, absolutely. You know, the next generation down. The next generations, in the plural, are so mollycoddled to the point that now it's almost a case of they can't be anything without reassurance. They can't be anything without knowing that they will be absolutely fine. It's almost as if we've got to be psychic now in order to survive this great world of ours.
Could you tell me what that mollycoddle word means? For
Mollycoddled.
I love it, though.
What does mollycoddled mean? Mollycoddled, I suppose, is the best described as being wrapped in cotton wool. Someone who is so protected by the people around them that they simply cannot be. They are not allowed to be themselves. They're not allowed to, as it were, damage themselves in any way because they're so protected.
I'm going to use that term now for like all the time.
Mollycoddled. So there you go.
Yes.
Absolutely. Indeed, exactly the same way that if you sort of think of a depressed dog, you think of a melancholy. Hey! Thank you very much. I thank you. I'm here all week, everyone. Oh, he does sound effects as well. You can definitely come back again. Fantastic. You know what? That's more money than the BBC throw at their sound effects department. I should know. Anyway, right.
We're not talking about everyone's mollycoddled.
We're not talking about everyone. I tell you what, Lady B. This is a microphone. This is a microphone talking to it.
It's neglected.
What, sorry?
Neglection will not enable you to self-love yourself.
You see, I told you she was into all of this. You got to learn to love yourself. I think you two are kindred spirits.
She walked out the door and I was like, I need to meet her now.
That darling.
Yes,
I am.
I'm living for it.
I'm totally and utterly flanked by self-lovers. I'm quite sure. And to be honest with you, I dare say that I get by a little bit myself with a bit of positive mental attitude.
It rubs off, doesn't it?
It absolutely. We won't dwell on what rubs off, but yes, absolutely. So there you go. All right. Look, I think that the best way to summarise Dr. Tony Ortega is to establish where people can find you if they want any more information about you. Let's do this now because we always run out of time on these interviews, and I'm very aware that we've rushed through it. So I want to hear right now. We've got time to do it. Where do we find more?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Dr. Tony Ortega, or www.drtonyortega.com. And I'm usually very active on social media, especially Instagram. I'm pretty addicted to it. I hate to admit.
Fantastic. Well, you're just taking a selfie, so I look forward to appearing on Instagram at Mr. Phil Dave, I'm just saying. But any odd way. All the same. Well, look, it's been absolutely fascinating. Do stick around for a little bit, because I think we can bring in our next guest now, who has joined us in the studio. Graham Godfrey is, do you know what, Graham, it's fascinating here, because I've got everyone who is a guest on Men's Radio Station. Yeah. We get given a brief sheet, okay, as we call in the trade. I'm holding up a brief sheet now to anyone on Facebook who doesn't know what I'm talking about. And in a nutshell, what that does, it has all of our show notes on it. So it tells us everything we need to know about the guests, what they're coming in and what they're talking about. And it includes their names and their titles.
Yeah.
Your name, Graham Godfrey, fine. Your title, passionate about business. Care to elaborate? What is it you do?
Passionate about business. Well, this was born from.
I do know that you're a coach.
I'm a coach. Some people would label me a life coach or a business coach, but it's evolved into many different hats. I suppose the reason it was called Passionate About Business was that I've been in business for 35 years, mainly in the insurance business, but.
So can we establish passionate about business is the name of your company? Is that right?
It's the name of it's the name of what I do. It's almost like a brand, but it's everything that I do. No, the reason I called it Passionate About Business was that I realised that after being in business for 20 years or so, I was sort of chasing the money. I was always sort of chasing the money. Sort of did okay, supported my family, did things here and there, worked really, really hard. That's what I was taught to do, work really hard and you'll get what you want. And, when you've got maybe a nice house and a couple of cars and you can go on holiday, you'll be happy.
Keep up with the goldsmiths.
And I got to that stage and I just thought, I'm not happy. Who told me I was going to be happy when that was going to happen? And I just wasn't really happy with what I was doing. I loved what I was doing and I loved the relationships with the clients, which I've still got now. But there were just parts of it that I just didn't like anymore.
So it's fair to say that money can't buy you happiness. You're one of maybe potentially.
No, I don't believe that. I think money can buy you happiness.
I've always said. Look, I'm going to be perfectly honest here. I've always said money can't buy you happiness, but I am more than prepared to be miserable finding that out.
Yeah, it's not really about the money. The money needs to be created. Money is a byproduct of everything that we do, and people chase the money and they chase all the things that they want. But I decided it was when I started in business, it was in 1989, 1990. We were in a deep recession. Interest rates were at 15%. Imagine a mortgage now at 15%. It would kill everybody. And, property price, I bought a flat and it halved in value in a year and we had negative equity. So it was tough then. And I was a commission only in those days. So it was tough. Anyway, 20 years later, after being in business and having my own companies, etc., I realised that I wasn't happy and I wasn't doing what I love. But it's this terrible thing where you're married, you've got kids, you've got responsibilities, you've got bills, all sorts of things, and we make excuses to ourselves. Well, I got all this stuff, I'm just have to keep going.
So I was saying to Dr. Tony just before that there's a very simple yet effective rule that we have on Men's Radio Station, where we ask questions that others wouldn't dream of asking, but you're under no obligation to answer them. Would you say that by being married, having responsibilities, having a family, would you say that you felt trapped in that situation?
No, I felt trapped in myself because I wasn't being truthful to myself, and I hadn't been for years. And I was more worried about everybody else, especially my family and my kids, but I was more worried about everybody else's opinions. But I had this epiphany moment. I'll tell you a funny story later about lampposts, but I had this epiphany moment where I suddenly decided that there's no more excuses. I just want to do what I love. I'm going to do what I love. I am going to do what I love. So I decided that I couldn't just stop what I was doing, and I had responsibilities to clients. So I allowed that situation to end in a good way, so everybody was looked after and there was no problems. And I decided I wanted to go into a part of the insurance industry that I love the most, which happened to be medical insurance. And everything that I'd learnt in the past, all the mistakes I'd made, all the failures I'd had, all the fun, all the stuff that goes on, I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. So I took an office in this lovely serviced office building, and they didn't have any offices that I could afford. Plus didn't have a lot of money then. It was 2008, it was recession again. I sort of knew what it was like. So I found a little cheese slice in the corner. They said, well, no one takes that office, we're going to just stick all the rubbish in there. I said, I'll have that one, please. So I took that office.
Very high opinion of yourself, clearly.
Well, I took that office, a desk, phone, computer. I had 2 clients, my mum and my wife's mum, and I bought a photocopier that could service 20 people that that took up all the room in the office, because I thought one day I might have 20 people. To cut a very long story short, I worked, I did 7 days a week, 5:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night for 2 years, and then I did that for another 3. But I loved it. I loved what I was doing with a passion. It wasn't like work. And the people that I was dealing with and the things that I was doing, it was just, I could have done it 24 hours a day if I didn't need any sleep, because I loved it.
You see, Tony, this sounds very much along the lines of what you're talking about whether or not are you here yet. So you actually established what you want to establish in life?
Absolutely. No, he's definitely a prime example of that. Doing something for what you love to do, not because of the result necessarily that everyone says that you need to have.
Yeah, but believe me, I'm a realist. It was tough. It was very, very tough. And when I had my office, the first office, and they said, we got to pay 3 months up front, I said, well, is there another way? So, you have to sort of find ways of doing things. But to cut a very long story short, I built the business into a fabulous business. I had amazing staff that helped me do what I wanted to do, and I sold it 5.5 years later and secured myself financially and took a year off. I hadn't really had longer than 2 weeks off, and even if I had 2 weeks off, I was never off in my head. I was in everything was going on in my head all the time anyway, so I never had any time off really.
Now, do you know what? It's curious you say about having to pay the rent, because very shortly I'm afraid we have to do that by going to a commercial break. But I would suggest at this stage that it's where we have to say farewell, I believe, to Dr. Tony Ortega. You are about to leave us once again. If we want to find you, your website?
drtonyortega.com, or social media, just Dr. Tony Ortega.
Fantastic. But we are going to continue to be joined by Graham Godfrey. You'll forever be wondering what the story about the lampposts was.
I will now. I'm like,
we're
now
going
I
to
want to
find that out, and we're going to find out much more as well. Graham Godfrey is our guest. You are listening to Men's Radio Station. It's Phil Dave in for us again with James Blake. Goddess of the Green Room, Deborah Blake, is also with us as well. And we hope you'll be with us as well, the other side of this.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's radio station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's radio station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Oh, we're flying away this afternoon, I tell you. I'm having a whale of a time. This is fabulous. I'm sorry, Russ. I'm very, very sorry that you're off sick. But, you know, any time you want to take a week off again, you're most welcome to.
You're missing
No
a good show, that's for sure.
Graham Godfrey is our guest in the studio here. You're listening to Men's Radio Station with Phil David. In for Russ Kane alongside me is our producer James Blake, who's pressing all the buttons. And we've got a new pose now. What's that?
Don't know.
Hang on a second.
25, got to come up with something new.
Hang on just a cotton picking a second. I'm sorry, Graham. We'll come back to you in just a moment. But I'm afraid that James has got this little thing now where he, for some peculiar reason, yet just as thrilling, managed to adopt the Usain Bolt pose. There we go, that one. Wherever it was mentioned, whenever his name was mentioned, he always felt the need to go into the Usain Bolt pose. So as a result, I'm mentioning your name.
I'm just demonstrating the pose.
Thank you. Very good.
You said Usain Bolt, so I thought
You
maybe
could be one of those, what are they, on The Price is Right, you know, those models where they sort of point to stuff and look very happy.
It's a dream of mine.
Might I suggest, actually, they look unnaturally happy, but let's not dwell on that because that show was axed many years ago. Luckily, this show is still here, though if I carry on, not much longer, I'm quite sure. Graham Godfrey from Passionate About Business. We were hearing before the break a little bit about Passionate About Business and what it is, but in particular that you are a coach, a life coach, and you were explaining a little bit about how you got into that. But now let's talk a little bit about what you do and how you do what you do, because by your own admission, you were telling us during the break there that you stick to unconventional methods. Now my ears prick up when I hear this, because forever we're always told about how one has to stick to conventional and must follow guidance from those who know best. But as far as I'm concerned, we wouldn't get you in here if we didn't think that you knew what you were talking about. So tell us about your methods and why they're unconventional.
Okay, a lot of the stuff that I've learnt and that I've created over a 25-year period of understanding human beings and understanding their behaviour, a lot of it I've been through myself. So I've failed multiple times and I've had disappointments in business and early childhood, lots of things that people talk about that they hide away. And I didn't realise at the time that those things were going to be so valuable to me later on. So a lot of things that I've learned in business and in life I've used in my coaching today. And the coaching came purely from people asking me how I sold my business and what I did and the procedures that I went through and the processes, and I was explaining all of those and thought everybody did them, but obviously they don't. So although it's passionate about business, it's actually passionate about life.
Does one matter more than the other?
No, because I think business, when you're in business, and this can be anyone from any walk of life in business and any level of success that they have, people have their own issues and their own things that they're dealing with on a daily basis. And I'll give you a real example. So yesterday, I had a really bad toothache and I went to the dentist and I had 2 hours of root canal treatment, which didn't work particularly well, and I've got to go back, so patch me up. And off I go. And today I'm on the radio and I'm thinking to myself at home.
And may I just say, by the way, we are truly grateful, despite the root canal treatment, that you're still here. So thank you.
This is going to explain an unconventional method to you, a real life example. So, I've had anxiety in the past, and anxiety is. They talk about it as a mental illness, but anxiety is an emotion. Anxiety is something that we get anxiety when a situation happens that we're worried about. And we're worried about the outcome. And when you've got anxiety, in the main, you think of the worst possible outcome that can happen. And we do something called mind talk. We talk to ourselves incessantly about what's going to go wrong. And if this happens, that's going to happen. If that happens, that's going to happen. And then we get to the end result. We think, oh my God, if that happens, I am going to be in real trouble. But actually, nothing's happened. Nothing has happened at all.
But it's all in anticipation. It's not necessarily knowing the outcome, is it?
Well, when you're anxious, you need to get to the outcome, because part of the anxious state is you need certainty in your life. You need to know exactly what's going to happen, and that's why people get anxious. So if we use this example, I'm at home thinking, and I suffer from anxiety occasionally. I'm a lot better with it now because I understand how to control it, and I'll explain some of the methods as well.
Can we, just before we get to the methods, can we establish how the anxiety, because this is really important for Men's Radio Station, it's the ethos of what we do, right? This is where men talk, it's where people actually get to understand why it is they feel the way they feel, and actually, more importantly, recognise they're not the only ones going through what they go through, because pretty much there is nobody, especially when it comes to mental health, who is the only person going through what they go through. So it's really important with individuals like yourself who are prepared to be open and honest, saying that you've suffered with anxiety, to tell us how it manifested itself in you. How did you know you were anxious?
I'll tell you how, because I'm at home, I'm on painkillers, and I'm thinking, you know what, I'm just going to cancel today. But there's a couple of things that happen in life.
The painkillers being, for something physical?
I've got a real pain in my mouth at the moment, and I've still got an infection in the base of my tooth, or they've taken the roots out.
Wow.
So I'm feeling a lot of pain right here, right now. So I'm not somebody that talks about, oh yeah, you should do this, and yeah, you should do that, and this is a really good process for you. I'm talking about real life situations that we all go through on a daily basis, and some processes that you can go through to make yourself feel better then and there. So, I'm thinking, maybe I'll cancel today. And then I'm thinking, well, no. And then I'm telling myself this whole story about, what if my tooth explodes on the train on the way up here, and I'm stuck up here with no painkillers, nowhere near a dentist. What am I going to do? And this anxious thing starts whirring around in my head. Again, thinking of the worst possible outcome. So I know that that's going on, and I'm saying it to myself. So I'm thinking, you know what? Okay, I know that's happening. Let's go into the Godfrey methodology that works every time, and let's try and change the way I'm thinking. Okay? Now, there's two sort of states of mind. There's a reactive state of mind. And a reactive state of mind is when you're banging on to yourself about how terrible you are, and you're a failure, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and you're putting all of your self-doubt on yourself.
Has anyone ever told you you're a failure?
I think possibly I have been told I'm a failure, but I think I tell myself I'm a failure more than anybody else.
Because the reason why I ask you that is because I certainly don't think it from speaking to you. I've obviously only met you 20 minutes ago, but I still, from speaking to you, I don't get that impression at all. But I wonder, because a lot of the time some of these negative thoughts are from people that have actually planted them.
Right, okay, so we're going to go off on a tangent now.
Make it happen. That's fine.
So we're going to go.
We've still got half an hour.
My coaching's about loads of tangents. So this is a great tangent. I'm glad you brought it up. Has anybody told you you're a failure? Okay, this is part of my methodology. I love being told I'm a failure. In fact, I want to fail as much as I possibly can.
Back up a second there. Right? Sorry, there may be the clip of the week. You love being told you're a failure.
Yes,
why?
Because the people that tell you who tell you you're a failure don't really understand what they're saying, because success and everything that you're looking for is found in failure. So when people say failure is not an option, they're heading for an unhappy journey. I did a talk once on failure is the only option. You see, if you want to find out what doesn't work for you, if you can find out as many things that don't work for you and you can find the bit that does, that's your bit, that's your niche, that's the bit that's going to make you happy. But in order to find that, you've got to find out what doesn't work. And you've got to find out what doesn't work as quickly as possible. So when we talk about negative and positive, we're taught that you're either negative or you're positive. And you mentioned earlier about positive mental attitude. Okay, taking that aside, when the sun shines, we don't benefit, we don't really realise how amazing the sunshine is until it's been raining. That's why in this country, when it's raining, we go abroad because we want the sunshine. But we need the rain to feel the sunshine. We need the failure to feel the success. We need those things. So what if all the things that you thought were weaknesses and the things that you didn't like about yourself were actually your strengths? What if you could draw from all the things that you've been told in the past through your whole life, or you don't want to be doing that, you don't want to feel like that, you don't want to be negative. What if actually understanding feeling negative and understanding how anxiety feels could actually be a good thing in your life?
Now, do you know, I totally relate to this, and I'm really sorry. Everyone who's listening to this, I know full well they're going to say, he always brings it back to himself. But I do bring it back to myself, and I tell you why I do, is because this is what Men's Radio Station is about. It's actually learning that you're not the only person who thinks or behaves in a certain way. For me, I always realised that when I was at school, said many times before on this programme, that I don't like the word victim, but I was subject to bullying, okay?
Yeah.
Now, I know I'm not the only one. Loads of people have been subject to bullying.
Too.
I'm not a unique case by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
One of the things they used to pick on me for was the way I spoke. Because I always, for as long as anyone can remember, spoke as if I had a plum in my mouth.
Yeah.
Hence probably working in radio, right? And it is actually precisely why I work in radio.
Yeah.
Because I know there was somewhere at the back of my mind for years of going through being told, oh, you're so posh, oh God, listen to the way you talk, aren't you marvellous?
I like how he goes more posh when he does that.
No, but I mean, make no mistake, I sound common compared to the rest of my family, I promise you. But the point was, having gone through that for years and being told that, maybe think in some deepest, darkest subconscious way, what is the one thing I could do to get back at them? And of course, it's use my voice as my tool, as my career. And short of working in a call centre, which wasn't an option because I didn't like the idea of it, no offence to anyone who does, you do great work, but it's just not for me. Radio was the obvious thing. And it was definitely part and parcel of my decision to make radio a career. So that really resonates with me, what you say about turning that negative into a positive. Do you know what? It absolutely pains me to cut this conversation here because we, can you believe, have to go for yet another break. But stick with us because, Graham Godfrey, you're not going anywhere, because after the break we're going to hear much more about the work you do and about, by your own admission, the unconventional methods. And who knows, we may even find out that story about that lamppost that you teased about a little earlier on. You're listening to Men's Radio Station with Phil Dave in for Russ Kane. Alongside me is producer James Blake, pressing all the buttons, and he's about to press this button that will tell you what's coming up on Men's Radio Station and who our sponsors are.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30pm on Men's radio station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
If you would only hear what I had to put up with instead of monitor speakers, any other radio station I've ever worked at, had the privilege of working at, has what we call in the trade monitor speakers, which means if you're not wearing your headphones, you can actually listen to the output when you're not wearing your headphones. Well, here we don't have monitor speakers. Instead, we have a singing producer who tells us where the jingles are playing, and by replicating them in a rather peculiar way, just when you thought the jingles couldn't sound any more obscure.
I gave you a countdown. You refused to listen. It was coming to the end.
Oh, incorrect.
I needed to make it very clear to you that you were running out of time.
Now, do you know, this is the way that I work. When you tell me 15 seconds, I have a countdown going on up here. I'm on it. Don't you worry. I'm perfectly aware of what 15 seconds is. I'm also perfectly aware of what a guest is, and I'm delighted to say that we still have our guest, Graham Godfrey, of Passionate About Business, in the studio with us. And you've been telling us all about your fascinating methodology, and in particular your unconventional methods, by your own admission, of how you treat... Yeah. Do you call them clients, patients?
Yeah, no, I coach clients. I coach, lots of different types of people.
Well, one thing that you mentioned a little earlier on, which we simply can't let you get away with, is you said that I might tell you about an unusual story about lampposts. And that was all I got from you. So I've absolutely no idea what this is.
Okay, just remind me later to tell you about the creative mind, because I'd like to just share something with you about how you can overcome anxiety pretty quickly, and it's a good tool to use. I'd like to share that. So lampposts. So, okay, when I was younger, I was bullied like you. I was bullied pretty badly, actually, and at one point it got to a stage where I was beaten up so badly on the train that, you know, it really started to affect me, and I couldn't get back on the train again. But I never really, as a youngster, I didn't have a lot of money. I used to clean cars to make money, but that wasn't enough, and I couldn't go to a therapist because in those days, it sort of wasn't that acceptable to go to a therapist. Anyway, I decided...
Regrettably, I think to a lot of people, even in this day and age, it's not acceptable to go to the therapist, but I find staggering, but let's not dwell on that.
So I decided, I thought to myself, I must have been maybe 13 or 14 at the time, and I decided, right, who can I go and speak to where I can download everything I need to say, and they just listen? So I was walking down my road, and I walked into a lamppost. And I thought,
physically, or just...
Yeah, I just wasn't. I was walking with my hands in my pockets, and I just wasn't looking. I just walked into a lamppost, and I said sorry to the lamppost. This is a bit like Wilson from Castaway with Tom Hanks. and that lamppost became my friend. And I could go to that lamppost and I could just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk to that lamppost. And I could get everything out.
Now, do you know what? To anyone listening, and I'm going to take real issue with anyone listening to this who thinks that sounds ridiculous, because do you know what? I don't think it does. Because what you've done is you've actually found your way of verbalizing, you found your way of actually releasing whatever het-up energy you have.
Yeah.
That's obviously getting to you.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, sort of, for whatever reason, making your life unhappy. So for you, if the lamppost was your release mechanism, then I say bravo for finding it.
I mean, I haven't really shared this with anyone before, so it sounds a bit weird, but I'll share something else with you that I haven't shared, is that photocopier that I had in my office for 20 people. That was Freddie the photocopier. So the lamppost, when in older years, became the photocopier. And I've always sat there and chatted
away.
away.
Himself. Hey.
I kept chatting to myself. No, that was a good release for me. It just helped me. And if you see the film Castaway, when he talks to Wilson all the time, it's the same thing. He just gets it out. So sometimes if your excuse is, I don't have any money, I can't go and see anyone, I can't speak to anyone, I can't speak to my wife, I can't speak to my best friend, I can't speak to my parents, I can't speak to anyone, go and talk to a lamppost, because you'll feel a lot better afterwards. A lot better. It's just a thing, you know? Maybe it's rubbish, but for me it worked.
But in particular, it's the points that people say, and quite rightly so, talking really does help.
It does help.
If you have an inability, not you, if one has an inability to be able to verbalize how you're feeling to another through whatever fear, maybe it's fear of rejection, whether it be fear of being judged, fear of laughed at, whatever it may be that is holding you back from talking to someone else, talk to something inanimate. If you talk to something inanimate, you're still getting the words out. You're still actually releasing that energy that is holding you back. And this is coming from someone who's by no stretch of the imagination is a psychologist. You know, I'm not medically trained on this at all. But I know because I talk to myself for a living.
Yeah. Yeah.
And believe me, it does make a difference. I've always said that with Men's Radio Station, even though I absolutely love what I do on this station, I love the opportunities to get, say, if Russ is not available, he wants me to cover for him. But even if I'm just in the studio each week with Russ presenting and me once in a while chipping in, it's highly therapeutic. And it is because it's talking and it's actually releasing whatever has been troubling you, or talking about your thought process. It honestly is miraculous. It's sort of so simple and incredibly effective, and clearly it has been for you.
Yeah, I think sometimes I get hairs to stand on the back of my neck, and I had it just then when you were talking, because I was just thinking to myself...
That might be the fan, I'm sorry.
No. I was just thinking to myself as you were talking, I'm actually getting more out of this than you are. I'm probably getting more out of this than anyone that's listening, because even just talking about it now and talking about the things that I know that work and that can help people, I'm actually helping myself at the same time. I'd like to share something with you, if I may, about today. So I came up on the train feeling a little bit anxious about my tooth, which is still pounding away while I'm talking to you, but...
You're doing good. Hang on in there.
But it's absolutely fine. So whenever I come up to London, I fill my pocket with pound coins, and whenever I see a homeless person, and again, I've never shared this with anyone, but... And I'm not saying it because I want people to think, oh, that's good. I'm just telling you because there's an example coming that actually helps me. I'm doing it because it helps me. So I come up with a pocket full of pound coins. Every time I see a homeless person, I look at them. I don't judge them. I don't care whether they're going to spend it on drugs or fags or whatever. I couldn't care less. I just give them a quid, because if I was sitting there and there were hundreds of people walking past when I was sitting there on the ground, freezing cold, I'd think, what, no one can spare a quid? So I just give them a quid, and that's the end of it. Now... I know.
Do you wait for thanks, or do you just drop
I don't
them
know.
off
I don't. Some people say thank you and some people don't. But I had such a moment outside this place, I can't tell you. So I know that when I'm feeling a little bit anxious about my tooth right now, and coming up on the train, I'm in this reactive state of mind where I'm judging myself continuously, and I'm coming from a place of fear. So I need to know, how can I come out of that state of mind? Okay? Now, when people say, oh, don't worry about it, that's even worse. And we can't flick a switch in our brain to stop worrying about something. It's really difficult. If someone can, tell me how you can do it. But this is another way of doing it. This is a brilliant way of doing it. You need to get into something called the creative mind. The creative mindset is when you actually do something else rather than worrying about yourself and all your problems. Is you might go for a walk, breathe in some fresh air. You might give something to somebody. Yeah, give a homeless guy a quid. Or you might decide that you're going to do something for somebody else. Or you're going to get creative. And what that does is it puts you into a different state of mind. So I came up here, walked past Costa just round the corner, walked past 2 homeless blokes. In fact, both had no shoes on, strangely enough, and they looked bloody cold. So I went to Costa, bought an egg sandwich for me, 2 egg sandwiches, and 2 tomato soups. Walked back, gave one to one and one to the other, and I gave them a £5 each as well. I only had a tenner on me, gave them a £5 each. Okay, one got very emotional, and we actually had a conversation, and it's Valentine's Day today. So I just said, look, happy Valentine's. Okay. I think they're appreciative, but that's not what it's about for me. What it's about for me is it made me feel good giving to them, not a quid, but giving them something of value. Now I've given them something of value and I feel great. I'm in the creative state of mind. I can't remember what it was like to be anxious. I can't remember what it was like to place all those things on myself because I'm in a different state of mind. So my actions have helped me flick a switch in my brain to go from feeling anxious and worried about everything to feeling great. So imagine if people could learn and understand how to change the state of mind, even if it's for an hour or 2. But imagine if they can do it for weeks and months. I've learned how to do it over years.
It kind of sounds like a type of meditation almost, what you're talking about.
Well, there's a whole... Well, I do meditate in the mornings, and if you want to go on a little tangent on meditation, I couldn't understand why people did it. I sort of couldn't work it all out. It all sounded a bit sort of weird to me. How can you just sit there and breathe and make funny noises and it's going to change your day? Anyway, well, and you got how long you got to do it for? Do you do it for a minute? Do you do it for an hour? I don't know. Anyway, I got
meditation doesn't necessarily come in the form of making, as you say, quote, funny noises.
Yeah.
Of course, it can be guided meditation as well, which of course is where you just listen to music and actually listen to a recorded voice, sometimes a live voice, just telling you different methods in which to relax. But absolutely.
Yeah. But that was my naivety. That's me looking at something with a label and then looking at it in the way that everyone's given me their opinions about meditation. Anyway, I do it 2 or 3 minutes in the morning. I do it when I'm in the shower. Just get loads of ideas in the shower. But what it does for me and what it does for people in business is in business and in life, you get stuff that happens during the day that's really annoying and winds you up and you get angry about it. And then you sort of slip into another reactive state of mind or whatever you slip into. But what it does for me, and I know it does for a lot of others, when those problems come, they don't feel so bad. They don't feel so extreme. In fact, some of them you don't feel anything. So again, it's another thing thinking, that's really strange. Why don't I feel so weird about that as I normally do? Why am I angry of the way I'm normally angry? Why? I spent 3 minutes in the morning meditating in the shower. Well, to be honest with you, if I can get over that just by standing in the shower for 3 minutes, imagine how some people are so relaxed after doing it for an hour or half an hour. So I'd say the coaching that I like to do is I'm trying to help people really understand themselves and then get the best out of them that they can. And if that's in business, then great. If it's in life, then great. It's the most beautiful thing in the world, and I love it.
Do you know what? It's been absolutely fascinating meeting you today, Graham Godfrey. Thank you so much for taking the time to come to Men's Radio Station and to speak to us. It really has been brilliant. If anyone wants more information about you, where do they go? Where do they find you?
They'll only find me on LinkedIn under Graham Godfrey, on my website, which is passionateaboutbusiness.co.uk. I'm not really on social media or anything else. It's hard to find me.
Doesn't matter. It's good enough for us. Thank you very much. Will you come back again?
I'd love to come back.
Fantastic. Well, we look forward to the next time you join us here on Men's Radio Station. It's Phil Dave in for Russ Kane with James Blake. The rest of the team will come back and unite for the last 15 minutes of today's programme right after this.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk, download the Men's Groups ground rules, download the Men's Groups check-in round. There are loads of videos and you can just hit the ground running, growing with other men.
Join me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour on Saturdays at 9 a.m, where I'll be interviewing some of the UK's most influential leaders to understand how they are tackling the stigma that surrounds mental health at work. That's me, Carl Simons, for the Business Hour at 9 a.m. on Saturdays here on Men's Radio.
Hi, I'm Noel McDermott, licensed psychotherapist and host of Wellbeing Wednesdays. During Wellbeing Wednesdays, I talk about all things psychotherapy and mental well-being, offering practical help and advice on issues around relationships, anxiety, depression, drugs and alcohol, whilst trying to improve your mental health and giving you an interesting stories from our guests. Join the conversation, have your voice heard, or ask for advice from one of my many specialist guests. We can try and advise you on your problems. Be part of the conversation. Come and join us every Wednesday from 9 to 10:30 p.m. on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, the only radio station that's 100% dedicated to mental health and well-being. We're on air and broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In fact, we never sleep. If you want to listen on the move, please download our app. It's easy to do. www.mensradiostation.com is the website, or follow us on social media. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Talking Therapy Sessions, a new radio show coming soon.
Hear pre-recorded professional counsellors talking live to their clients.
Hear real-life issues being discussed.
Listen to how trained practitioners deal with these issues.
Never had a therapy session before?
Not sure what counselling entails?
Tune in and hear firsthand what a therapy session is really like.
Brought to you by the Men's Radio Station in partnership with the One Stop Psychotherapy Shop and supported by over 200 trained counsellors across the UK.
Hi, I'm Alex Sitchenfeld, and I'll be launching my new show, Business Culture, on Men's Radio Station starting in February. You can catch the first broadcast on the 6th of February at midday. On my show, Business Culture, we will be talking about mental health and well-being in the workplace. You don't change culture through emails and texts, you change it through relationships, one conversation at a time. So join me, Alex Sitchenfeld, on my show, Business Culture, starting 6th of February. Mental health and well-being in the workplace starts with talking.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Oh, heaven help me, he's still singing those flipping jingles. For goodness sake, the sign's fallen off the wall. I've had to put up with you singing the jingles to me. Russ Kane doesn't have to put up with this when he's here.
Because when I say to Russ 20 seconds, he puts the headphones on and he gets ready to come back on air.
I live life on the edge, what can I tell you? And actually, that's exactly what I do. Because, you know, it's funny. Meeting the guests today has actually taught me that I think I sort of knew this anyway, based on sort of what we do here at Men's Radio Station, but it has sort of taught me the way that everyone has their insecurities, everyone has their own methods of dealing with them. And curiously, what's really curious is that some people actually spend arguably a long time trying to work out those methods. For me personally, I always sort of thought myself as very lucky for being able to find those methods quite early on in life. And I think it was because of relentless, constant taunting through childhood from peers that were supposedly my compatriots, you know, who obviously used to sort of pick on me as a result of it, which ultimately taught me inner strength and has helped me to sort of become who I am. But then when we started the show, of course, we were talking about the importance of love and how love actually does bring us sort of full circle and makes us sort of stronger people potentially and helps us to be the best that we can be. And Lady B, you've been listening throughout the programme. You've been in the green room, making sure you've been looking after everyone, doing a splendid job, by the way, I'm hastened to add, as well. And would you sort of say that you've noticed the theme as well, that love is ultimately sort of what ties us all together? This is going to sound so wishy-washy. I can only apologise. I'm really sorry. I don't mean it to sound wishy-washy, but it's what I've learned today. I feel like I've learned an important lesson here.
Well, yes, if we were taught, we were speaking earlier about it, if we taught this from birth, our psyches wouldn't be so screwed up. The pressures of society and the training of this and the doing of this and the critical... Okay, you can't bring up your children. I'm not saying to bring them up to be spoilt brats. That's not what self-love is. But we bring them up living on the outside, not the inside.
Yeah, there's
a quotation for you.
There's a great book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it talks about...
Graham's still here, by the way, I should say.
Hello.
We're delighted to say Graham Godfrey was enjoying himself so much that he's going to stick with us for the last 15.
It talks about the inner game and the outer game. It talks about self one and self two. So self one is the ego and self two is the body. So sometimes when you're playing tennis and you hit a bad shot, the ego, so the voice in your head says, "You idiot! You know, can't you move quick enough?" And then you
so often
right?
I play badminton.
Okay, same thing, right? So any sport, even golf, you know, all these sports, and then
I gave up on golf. It gave up on me, so I wasn't going to bother.
And then you just keep talking to yourself. But the idea of the premise is that quieten the ego down and just let the body perform. And sometimes if you don't think about it, and people say this when you take a golf shot, don't think about it, just hit the ball. So if you allow the body just to do what it can do best, normally you get the best result. So once you understand the inner game, then your outer game, so the inner game is inside your head and the outer game is the world. Once you can start learning your inner thoughts and your inner game, it's going to affect your outer game. So
it's your inner feelings.
Roger Federer, why is he a brilliant tennis player? He's mastered the inner game. He's got a coach that understands the inner game. All of these top performers.
Does it tantamount to overthinking?
A little bit, yeah, but we're arguing with ourselves all the time.
Yes.
When I leave here, I'm going to be talking to myself all the way home. Nobody knows I'm talking to myself.
Hey, I've made a living out of it. Right. Don't worry about it.
It's what we say. It's what we say to ourselves and the language that we use. So
I've stopped that. Have you not? As you're saying it to me, do you not put it into practice?
No. Well,
sometimes I go, are they going to let me back in now? I say to James. I said some things today. Do you think Mr. Kane will let me back? And he goes, "Oh, mother, stop being so..." And you'll stop being so insecure. So that part I'll do, but I'm half playing.
You said something brilliant, because if you listen,
you heard it live on air. I'm half playing.
We've got it recorded
now.
As well.
No, when I'm doing
will we
that...
ever take your word for it again?
No, not now. I'm not when I'm speaking on this. You know.
If you listen to something called
level.
The Psychology of Achievement by Brian Tracy, it's a really fantastic thing. You should listen to it. In there, one of the things he says is, I want you to say to yourself, I love myself. Obviously not out loud, just to yourself, I love myself, I love myself, and keep saying it over and over again. And after a while, you might actually love yourself, because...
But isn't the problem with that is you have to believe it?
But that's
you start to.
You start to believe it. Yeah.
In this inner shifts that I was talking about earlier.
In a what?
By Robert Holden. He says that for every negative thought to get it into practice in your psyche, you must think one positive one straight after it. And that's how you build it up, to stop that voice.
The way I like to think about it is, have you seen The Shawshank Redemption?
I know the story of Shawshank. I haven't seen the full film.
I saw it again recently.
He slowly but surely picks his way out of the prison to his freedom. So at first they don't think he's ever going to get out using this tiny little pick, but then eventually he gets out. It's the same thing. If you keep telling yourself it, eventually you will break down that wall and you'll get through the other side.
But you have to be...
All right, Andy Dufresne.
You need stamina. When you're suffering from this deep depression, you first of all, you must rest, because it requires stamina to beat depression.
Oh yeah, it
yes.
takes
So
the legs out
when
of
you're
it.
in that state, you can't think these thoughts. But to prevent myself from going back, I will not listen to it anymore. It's like a vicious harpy on your back. It wants the ruination
Don't
of
they
you.
call it the black dog or something?
Winston Churchill used to call his depression the black dog.
On your shoulder.
But there's a critic. It's the inner critic, isn't it?
And look at what a fantastic man he was, and the sort of things that he achieved. And there's a chap with depression. So maybe he learnt how to take that depression and use it for the good in a lot of the things that he did.
Yes.
It really is about... We're not all perfect, and we all have our own problems and our own issues. But imagine if you could get those problems that you think are problems and issues, Imagine if they weren't.
Well, he went to paint. He built a brick wall around his home. When he was having his down depression, those were the things he would do to come out of it, to build a brick wall.
Yeah.
I think that's before he came back and
Yeah.
helped in us win the Second World War.
You know, I believe that some of the things that we're taught that are wrong with us are actually good for us, but we need to find them. And when we start to find them, we start getting light bulb moments and epiphany moments where we think, actually, you know what? I'm actually pleased I've got that. It makes me different, makes me stronger, puts me in a different environment. I can talk to people in a different way. Actually, maybe that one thing that has been really bugging me all this time is actually the one thing that's going to help me. It's about discovering yourself a little bit more. And you need to do that by talking about it. And even talking about it now, I'm discovering things in my own mind that are coming into my head that are things I want to work on after this show. People just need people. We can't walk alone on this earth by ourselves. We need other people, and we need people to share things with, people that we trust. And that's why in business, in sport, in life, this is such a brilliant medium to talk. We need to talk more, and especially men.
Well, on that very basis of people needed people, it's exactly the same way as Adam turned to Eve and said that time in the Garden of Eden, "Do you love me?" And she said, "Well, who else is there?" So it's the same kind of basis,
this
isn't it?
morning, then.
Yeah, what, sorry?
This morning.
Into
That's
the
what I did.
microphone.
We had an Adam and Eve moment this morning, didn't we?
I was fully
Who
clothed.
else
How
is
dare
there?
you?
Who else is there when I said, "Marry me, Phil"?
Yeah,
Who
I
else
see.
is there? Look.
I feel like you have to get over this now. I have tried to let you down gently, you know.
On air as well.
Dennis, you are sitting there sort of very sort of with decorum, but also in silence. But this is all very much a part of what you do with Psychreg, isn't it? You know,
Yeah, I'm trying to process on what you're talking about, self-love. Yeah, and I think it really makes perfect sense that if you want to have a more meaningful with other people, it all starts from within. But I also want to touch upon that sometimes love or any sort of relationship, it could also be overpowering. That's why there's some people who suffer from domestic violence, and I don't think we talk much about that this afternoon. You know, there are cases where people they just try to stay on a relationship because they love someone, even though it's not already healthy for themselves.
Well, they don't love themselves enough to stay in that relationship.
That goes back to self-love. Yeah.
Yes, you don't. When you're well, you won't put up with that, will you? But it takes an awful lot to.
I don't know. I mean, look, it's every situation is different, but I think everybody feels for themselves that what they need to achieve and what they need to do is so difficult, and there's so much to lose if it goes wrong.
Do you mean we're brought up broken?
I just think that a lot of people got a lot of problems, and it's not just so easy just to do this, that, and everything else. You know, these things that I see, and I've seen them for years. 7 steps to success. Yeah, take these 7 steps, and you'll be successful. It's rubbish. It might be 100,000 steps to success. It might be 50,000 steps. If you think you can take 7 steps to success, then you're desperate.
The one step
do you know
to
what?
success is to change your belief system.
And I'm afraid, on that bombshell, that's where we have to leave it for today. I'm so very sorry, but I do have to say a huge thank you to Dr. Peter Marshall, Graham Godfrey, who's still with us, who's been fantastic. Great to meet you. Dr. Tony Ortega, who we met earlier on. Thank you very much to the team, to Goddess of the Green Room, Deborah Blake. Thank you very much to Dennis relojo-howell, Mr. Social Media himself, to James Blake, pushing the buttons and almost making this show sound remotely good. Thank you very much indeed for that. And most importantly of all, thank you for listening, because we don't take it for granted. We really appreciate your company here at Men's Radio Station. We are on 24/7, so you've got absolutely no excuse. You'll be able to hear this show and any other show on our fantastic lineup. Go to mensradiostation.com. You'll hear all the information there and see all the information there. Russ Kane, with a little bit of luck, will be back to normal next week, where he belongs. But from me, Phil Dave, wishing you a very pleasant week until we meet again. Goodbye.
You're listening to
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Do you want to hang out and really know that you've been listened to? Do you want to debrief and have a laugh and not have to fall down the same hole as every other man in front of you? Then why not go to mensgroups.co.uk